I know.
Tonight. So I'd like to open this pre-meeting of the May 21st Murray City Planning and Zoning Commission. And with us right now, we have Jared Hall, myself, Phil Markham, Scott Woodbury, Travis, Sue Wilson. There she is.
Hey,
Susan Nixon joins us. Melinda Greenwood is here as well. And Ned Hacker just joined us. So we have more than a quorum right now. So this evening, we've got a pretty average agenda, except for the Applegate Townhomes project. That's going to obviously be a hot button thing. So let's get started here with approval of minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at them? And that you know what, there was one small change on the approval of minutes that I wanted to bring up. I don't think it quotes me as saying something, and I don't think it was me. It's on page 2. Halfway down, it says, Mr. Markham asked Mr. West his feelings about the request from Salt Lake City. I don't think that was me. But I could, hey, it's not a big deal, but I just didn't think that was me.
I don't have a recollection of what might have been.
I think you did. I think you because it had just been mentioned and then you said something about it. Do you want us to, or what are your thoughts on it, or something along that line?
Okay. All right. That's fine. Then that's good. I am getting older. And so, that's what happens.
It was a good question.
They looked great. I thought they were awesome. Anybody else have any input on those?
No, they look good to me.
Okay. All right, good. Okay.
Oh, I have something on page 4. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's great, Sue.
Ryan Reynolds, 5230 South Wonder Lane. I could not find a Wonder Lane. I can find Wander Lane, but not Wonder Lane.
Probably Wander. Yeah.
That's what I thought too, because
It's got to be Wander.
Yeah, it's probably Wander Lane.
We'll fix that.
Okay.
we wonder how we wander.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the next thing, conflict of interest. Everybody feels okay?
Yes.
All right. Ned's the only one that I'm concerned about.
I'm good.
Okay, good. That works for me. And no findings of fact tonight, so that's easy. So when we start the meeting, the next thing I will do after saying there are no findings of fact, I'm going to read an opening statement that Melinda has provided me concerning the electronic meetings. We had a
good idea.
citizen that wrote an email that was protesting and said that he didn't agree with this and that it was unconstitutional and all of that. He got a reply from the city attorney, G.L. Critchfield, and I have a statement that I'm going to read prior to us starting the meeting tonight.
And we're a public organization, and we've had the same thing, and we
Sure.
reference the governor's decree and whatnot, and Critchfield's right. We're good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're good. It's a brief statement, average paragraph, and then we'll move on to sacred energy. And who's going to be doing that?
I will, Phil.
Okay, Jared.
All right. So Sacred Energy, this is, you guys probably remember 296 East, 4500
Yeah.
South recently. And I know Janet's joined our meeting prior to the regular hearing, but we processed a conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast, some limitations under the conditional use. Janet has her business, Sacred Energy, across the street. There are aspects of that will work better in CD zoning, and she would like to rezone the property to move parts of the business across the street with the bed and breakfast. And that'll obviously reduce the area that she can use the bed and breakfast for, but that's all manageable under that conditional use. So she hasn't really moved forward on the conditional use at all yet, so it's a good time to make the other adjustments. And we are, it's the general plan says yes, the future land use map here. You might remember last year we modified the zoning of the house next door, the property next door that was in the GO zone as well. And we changed that from GO to CD for the Hidden Treasures, I think it was called, Hidden Treasures.
Yes.
Secondhand shop. So it's right next door to them. It's the same kind of thing. The general plan, future land use map, calls for all of the frontage of 45th South right up to Janet's property at Atwood to be in the CD zone or in commercial zoning. So if it's in the general plan, we're recommending for it. It'll mean she has to manage the business along with the bed and breakfast, but we have conditional uses for that, so we can deal with that.
Okay. Any public comment concerning this, the Kissimakis family or anything?
Had a question from them on the phone right as we got started with when the notices first went out, but it was more a reiteration of some of their concerns from the bed and breakfast.
Okay, great. All right, anybody else have any input or that on that?
Just a quick question for understanding. It seems very clear cut to me. I just want to make sure, am I missing anything? Will the conditions that we set previously still be required? They won't be changed anyway, right?
No, they may be what's the word I'm looking for? Magnified. We might have to reduce the number of rooms that she can let for the bed and breakfast, depending on the space that's needed for the business.
Good.
Okay, and then help me out here, Jared. I don't remember the technical term, so I'm going to not technical. I'm gonna dumb it down. Sorry for me. In that meeting, we just said that there would be other organizations that were in charge of maintaining regulations around bed and breakfasts and eating versus sleeping versus bath. All those are still in place.
Those are all still in place, not affected by the zoning being one or the other. Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, let's move to agenda item number 5, Murray Burton Acres amended. And it is a subdivision project.
Susan, do you want to come around, Susan, or do you want to talk
Can
about it?
you hear me well enough if I sit here?
Can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Great.
So this application is for a boundary line adjustment between two lots, which are actually lot 18, Murray Burton.
I keep thinking about that strip between us.
Oh, we're getting some back feed.
Oh, is
I need to,
it can happen.
I just need to mute Janet. I got it. Okay.
So in 2000, Mr. Poole purchased the southern portion of lot 18, which is 412 East Afton Avenue. And he purchased about 5,200 square feet. He did this by way of a deed, didn't go through any city approval. Then subsequently built a sport court. He now is wanting to add additional property, acquire more property from the original lot and make it so it's a buildable lot. But in order to do that, the lot wasn't quite big enough, so he applied for a variance, an area variance, which he received the variance last month from the hearing officer, catch a couple weeks ago. And one of the requirements in that variance was that he received lot line adjustment approval from the planning commission. So then he's now applied for that. So the lot is actually less than 8,000. It's 7388 square feet. The other lot on Afton Avenue, the original lot would be 8119 square feet. And that is basically it. We have recommended 3 conditions of approval, and Jared and I were talking today and thought if the planning commission thinks it's a good idea to add a 4th condition, that the sport court be removed, possibly within a 1-year time period. We can't make it conditioned prior to recordation of the plat because they're not recording a plat. The boundary line adjustment, they don't have to record a plat. Because our code does not allow for accessory uses to be on a lot without a main dwelling. So it's been out of compliance for 20 years. So this might be a good opportunity to bring it into compliance, even though the intention is that he will build a home on the new lot.
Yeah, it's going to go away anyway.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
That's the intent, yeah.
All right, so I don't understand that. If you buy the lot across next door to you, you can't put a sports court on it? Why not? There's
Well,
nothing else there.
Well, you can, but our code requires that it's an accessory use. And if it's on its own lot, it's not accessory to a main dwelling. It's just an accessory use.
So if they changed the lot lines and made it one piece of property?
He did not combine the lots, which was, the city was a code enforcement issue for a few years. We tried to get him to combine the lots, or
Why didn't he do it?
that's a good question. He claims that the city said it was okay. I don't know that it just was never enforced. I think.
Blame it on Tingy.
Well, this
So
actually
Predates
this
him.
predates.
So if he
it really
came back,
does.
so if he came back in and wanted the 349 lot and the 341 lot to be one lot, could he leave the sports court?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
all right. I
You
got it.
couldn't build a second house.
Right. Well,
Right. You wouldn't have enough room for a second house.
so that would be the
Fun fact.
condition that he can't have the sports court on a separate property. If he combined them, it'd be all right. If he's going to build a house, get rid of the sports court early.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
In some amount of
And he needed to acquire additional property in order to build a home, but there wasn't enough between the 2 lots. So
Yeah.
So it's kind of complicated, but anyway, it should have been a code enforcement, probably should have filed a certificate of
You
non-compliance.
know, if you look at the property and you step back and look at it and see what he's wanting to do, makes a lot of sense.
And it's good looking sport court.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's the nutshell of it
Okay.
all. So,
All right. Any other input on that item? We move forward here. Okay. All right. Well, now we're moving to Applegate condominium subdivision amended.
That'll be me. I have so I just want to background this a little bit and make sure we're all on the same page. There are kind of in the slides that you're going to see tonight in the PowerPoint, there are the 2 different agenda items, but there are really 3 approvals that are kind of linked together. The first agenda item being this amended condo subdivision. So this is, in a nutshell, that's the part of the application where the Applegate Homeowners Association carves out 5.07 acres from their existing condominium project
Right.
in order to sell that for development. The next application is actually in 2 parts. It's a conditional use to allow, it's conditional use approval for the PUD and it's preliminary PUD subdivision approval. So if it's all right, my suggestion is that I've written the 2 different reports detailing the 3 different things. I want to go through agenda item 6, but all of the comments that people have been making, you'll notice because you guys have read them, all the comments that people have been making relate to really kind of all of it together. You can't do the PUD unless the 5 acres gets split out.
Right.
So I suggest we go through the PUD, we go through the condominium amended that we're going to talk about right now. And then without taking a vote on it and things like that, we would move on, review the PUD, read everyone's comments because we have to read in a bunch of comments here and talk about everything. And then when it's time, when we're done and ready to take a vote, we can take a vote on the subdivision that is the condo amended subdivision that creates the 5-acre parcel. And then if that passes, move on to do the conditional use approval and preliminary PUD approval. I've set up.
Okay, isn't it preliminary and final, however?
Final for the amended condo, but that's all.
Okay.
One of the comments that people kept making is, how are you going to do this all in one shot? We're not.
We're not.
The 5 acres gets done in one piece, one approval, prelim and final. But the PUD has to be done as a preliminary approval, and then they've got to solve a bunch of things and come back for a phase 1 final and phase 2 final. Yep.
That was not clear to me, so that's,
Yeah,
I
it
feel
wasn't
much
clear.
better about everything that's going to take place tonight.
Glad you
And I
asked.
agree. So Jared, might you say that in your presentation to make the
Sure.
audience as clear as we are now?
Absolutely. You bet.
Yeah, Jared, when I introduce this, this item, do you want me to just state that we've received the emails that we have? I have them printed out in front of me here. I can just say the names of the people, or do we have to read all that in?
Consulting everybody, we feel like we better read them in. So
Okay, who's going to
prepared
do that?
We're prepared as staff to take turns so that we don't blur our
Okay.
fertilizers.
Because that's going to take a while, and I will fade if I have to do all of that.
We can do that.
Okay.
So Jared, if you did this in 2 separate parts, what would be the difference between a preliminary approval and then move on to a final approval?
Which part of it though, Ned? The 5
The
acres
Number
originally? Or
6, yes, to get the acreage.
to get the
separate.
acreage, if we split that one up, it would look exactly the same. There's
Okay.
nothing more to do. So
So in a different kind of project, what would be the difference between a preliminary and a final approval?
do you mean in terms of the application? Because I mean, the preliminary
Yeah.
approval allows you to move on toward final.
Right?
Planning Commission, if there's more than 10 lots, our code says we
Right.
need to look at it in 2 different pieces so that we make sure we don't
Okay.
miss anything. The theory behind that being that the simpler the subdivision is, the less likely we are to miss anything that's needed. Of course, you always have the back end when the engineers are going over the plat. We don't record anything until our catch-all phrase, you got to meet all the requirements of the engineer, including all those things, leaves Trey and Planning Division room to fix anything that we might have even missed in the public realm. So
So if it's less than 10 lots, you don't have to do a final, you
you don't
just
have to do them separate.
approve it.
Right.
Yep.
If it's more than 10, you get a 2-step process.
Correct. And PUD, regardless of how many lots in a PUD, we
Right.
always do the 2 steps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I didn't know that.
All right. Well,
So
Jared?
item 6 is just
Yeah.
that, carving out the 5 acres.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
So are you gonna do one public hearing for both of the items?
well, that's what I think, because we're gonna open a public hearing for item 6 and 7 at the same time.
Okay.
Because
Otherwise,
Hey.
I don't know how we differentiate the comments.
Right.
right, and that's what I'm saying is they're separate items, but we need to. So I don't feel like you guys should take a motion and vote on item 6 without hearing all the comments. But it also doesn't make sense to hear all the comments until we've gone through the planned unit development subdivision stuff and talked about that. So
So Jared,
item 6 and move right on to 7.
are you going to address, how are you going to address each of the comments? So we're going to read the comment that came in, the email or whatever. Are you then going to address the items in that particular, so we can stay consistent and say,
Yeah.
you know, so-and-so submitted this, okay, we will answer that. Okay, the next one, we'll read it in, then we answer that, just rather than trying to go back and answer them all later?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure how to do that. To be honest, there are a lot, and a lot of them are. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is there's a lot. The good news is a lot of them are fairly repetitive.
Right.
So we can probably go. This is my opinion. I think we can go through them, have them heard, and then if people are making notes on things that catch their ear, as we will as well, we'll try to go back through and answer any of those
Okay.
comments. I think we can do it. We do it in the public hearings all the time. This will be no different, really. There's a lot.
Well, I think the only difference is you're gonna have, I mean, particularly, I think Dunn's, you know, his email was quite lengthy.
Yeah.
And so I think people are gonna forget. So it feels to me like you could address them, and then if the same issue comes up, you could say, this was addressed previously as a reminder, this is what it is, but I'll defer to you. You've got,
I
smart
don't
people
mind
in
either
there.
way. We
So-
can try to do that as we go.
But whatever. Because I guess my thought is if we go and reread all the stuff in, then people may be like, oh, I got another question. Let me shoot another email. Let me do this. Let me do that. Whereas if you address them, then maybe you're like, oh, okay, I probably don't need to ask for that question. But I don't know. I'm
Well, they're only going to be able to submit emails during the public comment period also.
right.
It's going to be long while we're reading them.
Yeah.
Okay, so question about this. So the 3-minute limit is not going to apply because we're reading the comments instead of letting people tell them?
We'll try to read them, and we talked about this earlier, and like Melinda said, we'll time it, and if it's going past the 3 minutes, we'll say we're not able to finish the comment. It's some of them are.
Okay, because I can,
Yeah, I think that's hard though, because it's like who's reading and how fast, and
exactly.
that feels like a bad political move to me.
Well,
to
and
read-
last time we rescinded the timing thing for a lot of the comments and just let people have their say so that the meeting didn't blow up.
I think we're okay with reading them all the way through, guys. They're long, but we can read them fairly quickly.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think it's
I say,
manageable.
yeah, let's read them all in. Let's make sure
Okay.
they're all in and not
I
worry about
agree.
the time and, so.
Yep, I agree.
Great.
I mean, if we need to, Travis will play the piano in the background. It'll be fine.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to defer with the 10 minutes we have left. You've all had the report. I wonder if it would be better to let we're going to carve out 5 acres. We're going to realign the road. There's the biggest picture, okay? There are 2 phases to the project. So you're looking
On page 5,
Uh-huh.
on number 2, is that a typo?
On number 2.
Yeah, it says the applicant shall prepare a final subdivision plat with complies, or should it say which
It should
complies?
say which. Yep. Should say which.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you discuss the non-major road realignments that are going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. So there are 2 different realignments. The first one being Rome Beauty. So Rome Beauty right now runs up into a pod kind of. And that needs to go out through to Glendon Street. So this is tied up in the numbers of units that are being added into the project, but also in the number of units that are just already there and served by a single entrance in and out. Engineering is very uncomfortable with that. There should be at least 2.
So it needs to be brought up to code.
Needs to be brought up to meet engineering standards for exiting from this number of units. 172 units in Applegate, they already ought to have 2. We're honestly getting them right up to where there ought to be 3. Engineering has agreed that with the extension of Rome Beauty out to Glendon Street and the loop road, the other proposed road that looped Rome Apple Road between Applegate Drive and Rome Beauty, there'll be enough fire and emergency access and then exiting available to people in that subdivision, in both the subdivisions, the old and the new, to meet codes and get them out. But we do need that access out to Glendon Street.
Do we know enough now to be able to say that connection to Glendon cannot be disputed by, I don't know, the city or traffic study or something else that it would not be allowed because of the access to the stake building and the access to the apartments across the street?
That's the street. I believe so, yes. So we've been looking at different options for 18 months, trying to find a way out, trying to get UDOT approval to go directly out to 5400 South, not possible. Not to go out west into the subdivision. It's kind of a spider web. It doesn't take you directly anywhere. Glendon is our best option, as bad as it's imperfect, best option. We have enough traffic data from the area, not specific to this project necessarily, but from the area, that we felt like Glendon was doing.
Is it absolutely necessary to remove that green space in the middle of Rome Beauty? Can't they go on the right side going out and the left side coming in? You know what I mean? Like a northbound and a southbound, because going over there today, I thought, there were people using that lawn space. There's a picnic table there. I mean, that's an amenity that condominium project has furnished those people, and it really doesn't hurt traffic to have one, have like a roundabout more or less.
I think that it's maybe not necessary to remove all of the green space, but we have to balance that. And this is one of the comments that came in from the public. So I'm glad you mentioned it. The route to Glendon needs to be more or less direct to meet the requirements for exiting from the subdivision that Trey is imposing. So the roadways going around it will stay there, but there'll be like driveways leaving it to take people to their garage units that are already there. And we can run the road through the middle of that landscaping, and we can keep the landscaping on both sides, but it needs to be more or less a straight shot. In looking at finals, we can ask Trey if we can run it to one side or the other to preserve more of the green space, but basically the way we've looked at it, we'll get to add green space to either side of it, but we need to run straight up to Glendon. So
What's happening at the end of the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, at the end of the big cul-de-sac at the main road, that cul-de-sac gets an emergency access for fire and emergency services, and maybe exiting in the event of the kind of things that are happening during this spring with earthquakes and whatever, but with bollards that can be dropped. And other than that, it's a pedestrian access only.
Yeah, it shows that it's a very narrow road exiting from that cul-de-sac.
Yeah, it's just a little, that's what you're seeing on the east side of it, and I don't have the slides up yet, but on the east side of it, or not, I always think up is east. The north side of it, you're seeing Gravenstein, the existing road Gravenstein going out of it. At the bottom of it, there is the pedestrian path, and then you can see kind of dots in there. Those are the bollards that would connect it to Lucky Clover otherwise. Is it Lucky Clover?
I believe so.
But they would connect it otherwise, but those bollards will be in place to keep vehicular traffic from going through.
Hey, can I push this on to the next topic? I just feel pressure because we're out of time.
Yeah.
And I didn't read the comments till today, sorry. Reoccurring comment, which is also a question of mine, is why 15 feet? Why the easement? Why not 25 feet? Can we make it 25 feet? Can it be buildable? Why not?
On the rear yards, the rear yard setbacks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me
To give
talk.
them full driveways.
Yeah, let me speak to that just a little bit. It's hard to separate the 15-foot, the rear yard setbacks of those homes from the overall design. So it's easy to look at them and say that's too close and these are going to be too tall, et cetera. But the alternatives are that it's rear loaded. And if we rear load these kind of units, we wind up with alleyways that need to be wider even. And then we wind up with 3-story units. We didn't want 3-story units because of the proximity. We increased 10 feet and wind up with 3 stories. This was the better option as we looked at them because it's a 2-story unit. It's probably 18 to 19 feet tall. In the zone that Majestic Circle is in, you've got a 35-foot height allowance. If these were single-family homes, this wouldn't be a question. And they're not any taller than single-family homes. They are 10 feet closer. But if the 25 feet has been maintained on the Majestic Circle side, you're really still talking about 40 feet between the units, between buildings on the one side subdivision and the new subdivision. 10 more feet is nice. And if we were able to, there's one suggestion that if we didn't make Applegate Drive 60 feet wide, if we went to 50 feet wide, we could add that 10 feet back in. That is possible. That's a question we'd have to answer between preliminary and final after traffic studies have been done. We need to be able to answer that question, I guess. And if we could get that extra 10 feet, I would very much support just adding it to that rear yard.
Well,
Right
now you've left me with 2 quick questions. I mean, how can we approve this variance if there's other options that might meet the
Not a
problem?
variance.
Oh, that's right.
It isn't a variance. It's planned unit development. And I do want to point out one other thing. There are a lot of comments about that distance and the height of the buildings, et cetera. And I know it's shocking and I know it's a big difference. The challenge is that the units in Applegate condominiums have for 30 plus years been 200 yards away from these backyards. And whatever units we put in at 15 feet, at 20 feet, at 25 feet, it's a jarring, jolting kind of a change. This zone that it's in, RM15, allows 40 feet of height. And it was designed with that same setback that we apply to R18 typical subdivisions, not because that's the ideal setback or anything, but because you were contemplating not probably townhomes or duplexes or twin homes like we're looking at here, but rather 3-story, 12 plexes and 14 plexes and 20 plexes. And those would be 20 feet or 25 feet from the rear yard. That is not what we're proposing here. This is a better option than that. These are townhomes, and mostly in 2s and in 3s. So the impact is going to be significant. I'm not trying to downplay that, but it is not the impact that it could be for what it's worth.
And I know we're in a hurry now, so maybe you'll expand
Yeah,
upon it in the
We're
meeting.
about there, Lisa.
But you said something about, it would be three stories then if we gave an extra 10 feet. And I don't understand why it had to be taller if we gave more feet, but you can explain that in the meeting?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Rear loaded units usually wind up being 3 stories.
Okay, well, that's about all the time we've got. So we'll take a breath for 30 seconds, and then we'll go into our regular meeting. Okay. The pre-meetings are done. It's over.
Thank you.
Hey, Travis, that light doesn't blind me coming off. I would like to welcome everyone watching tonight and commission members to the May 21st, 2020 meeting of the Murray City Planning Commission. My name's Phil Markham. I'm the chairman of the Planning Commission this year. With us tonight, we have Scott Woodbury, the vice chair, Travis Ney, Sue Wilson, Lisa Milkevich, and Ned Hacker. Maren Patterson is not present tonight and is excused. Staff from the Planning Division includes Melinda Greenwood, the Director, Jared Hall, and Susan Nixon. So with that, we will get started this evening. I would like to first read a statement that I've been asked to read concerning the electronic meeting this evening. We had a letter from a resident contesting the electronic meeting format that the city is using. The city attorney did reply to that individual, and I would like to read this statement at this time. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic and our desire to comply with Governor Herbert's orders and the Salt Lake County Health Department's orders, we have determined holding an in-person planning commission meeting would not be a wise or safe practice. On March 18th, 2020, Governor Herbert issued Executive Order 2020-5, suspending the enforcement of provisions of Utah Code 52-4-202 and 52-4-207 due to infectious disease COVID-19 novel coronavirus. And on March 17th, 2020, Murray City Council adopted resolution number R20-13. These orders and provisions allow for public meetings to be held remotely and electronically. We're holding today's Planning Commission meeting via video conference, and the meeting is being live streamed. If you have a public comment to submit to the Planning Commission, please do so via email at planning@murray.utah.gov. We do not anticipate any issues, but we are relying entirely on technology to host this meeting, and we may encounter unexpected circumstances. Please know that we're doing our best to be open, transparent, and accessible during these difficult times. Thank you, and that's the end of that statement. So now we will proceed with the agenda, and when we get started here, as I bring the different agenda items up for consideration, after presentation by the staff, we will afford the applicant the opportunity to present any additional information that they may deem helpful, and then questions from the commission, and we will open up each agenda item for public comment. And during that public comment, we have one particular item at the end of the agenda, the Applegate condominium subdivision and the Applegate Townhomes PUD that have generated a lot of interest and a lot of public comment. We have several emails that we will read into the record during that public comment period. And so when those agenda items come up, if you have not submitted a public comment and you would like to do so, please use the email address and send that email, and we will read that into the record. All right, with that, we'll move to a few business items here. Number one on our agenda tonight is the approval of minutes, and it is the minutes from the May 7th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And has everybody had a chance to look at those minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any questions, comments, concerns, or anything like that regarding them?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I ask
Lisa.
a question? I apologize. I was trying to find my paperwork. I thought I had it all in front of me. Was there a phone number the public could call in as well?
No, I believe it's just email. Is that correct, Jared?
That's right. Once the meeting starts, just email. We take calls right up to 5 o'clock. But after that point, when we're getting ready for the meeting, we just send it to email is all.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Sorry.
Thank you. Not a problem. All right. Approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
Well, just the spelling correction on page 4 is noted in pre-meeting.
Right. Yes, we have that as a clerical condition. Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. Make a motion that commission approves planning commission meeting minutes from May 7th with the few corrections that we discussed in the pre-meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Ned.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion by Ned Hacker, a second by Scott Woodbury to approve the May 7, 2020 Planning Commission minutes. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Conflict of interest is our next item on the agenda tonight. Do any commission members feel like they have a conflict of interest with any items on the agenda?
No.
No.
No, I agree. Okay,
Nope.
seeing none, that is over. And the next item would be approval of findings of fact. However, we have none for this evening, so that's an easy one to deal with. With that, we'll get into the meat of our agenda for this evening. Agenda item number 4 is a zone map amendment for Sacred Energy LLC at 296 East, 4500 South. They're seeking a zone map amendment from GO to CD. And Jared, you'll be presenting that to us this evening.
Yes, thanks. So as you mentioned, Phil, this is a zone map amendment request for 296 East, 4500 South. That's the property you can see right here highlighted in yellow. This is Atwood Boulevard, 4500 South. The zoning right now is general office. We do have a spot of CD zoning right next to it, the commercial development zone. That's the requested zone. This property right here is Hidden Treasures. You might recall as a commission that last year we changed the zoning of this property from general office to CD, commercial development zone, at that property owner's request. That was in response to our future land use map that I want to show you next. All that red indicates general commercial. The property's highlighted here. This is Sacred Energy, Janet Wald's property. The whole of the frontage of 4500 South on the south side, up to 250 East, to 300 East, where Atwood Boulevard intersects, we have slated for commercial, general commercial zoning in the general plan. So it does fit the future land use map, and it meets the goals and intents of the general plan. Just to go over a couple of the changes that are in your report packets. In the existing general office zone, you have allowances for office uses, medical and professional, advertising, employment services. This is just kind of a sampling of some of the things that are allowed. Public and quasi-public uses require conditional use permits. In the CD zone, it's commercial and retail uses, restaurants, banks, government services, schools, public and private. And then you have allowances with conditional uses with conditional use permit for things that are not conditional uses or allowed in the general office zone, like contractor services, vehicle sales, Reiki, and other things like that. So we do feel like those kind of uses are generally beneficial for this area and fit in and would be appropriately served by 4500 South. And that's why in the general plan, we use the future land use map to designate these properties on this frontage for that commercial zoning. And we are recommending that the Planning Commission forward recommend of approval to the City Council for that requested change from general office to CD zoning. Any questions?
Any questions from commission members for the staff?
No.
All right. Well, with that, I will ask if the applicant is listening in.
I've just unmuted her. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. For the record, would you please state your name and address for us?
Janet Wall, 296 East, 4500 South, Murray, Utah.
Okay, great. Ms. Wall, is there any additional information that you would like to provide concerning this request?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And any questions from commission members for the applicant?
No.
Okay.
No.
Mr.
All
Chair,
Yes,
can I ask staff a quick question,
absolutely.
just for the record? Mr. Hall, it's just my understanding that this business came to the commission a few weeks ago and asked for conditional use permit for bed and breakfast, and it's my understanding that all the conditions in that process still will remain. Is that correct?
Right. That's
Thank
correct.
you, sir. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, well, with that, we'll open this item up for public comment. We'll take a couple of minutes and allow individuals, the public, to have a chance to email some comments or questions to the staff. And so bear with us while we take a couple of minutes and wait to see if we have any feedback. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting, do you have the ability to see everybody? I can't see anyone.
I think there's some grids up at the top of the pictures that you could probably click on. That that multi-grid, looks like 9 squares there. If you click on that, I bet you can see everybody.
That's exactly what I was looking for and haven't been able to find. Is it just me then? I'll keep looking.
Yeah, you know what? The view I have is 4 of us just down the right-hand side of the screen with an arrow down at the bottom, but up at the top, there's other options. You can
I'm
show a
looking
grid
at all of your
video.
pretty faces.
Lisa, if you go up to the top right-hand corner, it says speaker view or it says gallery view. And there's another little box, full screen view or.
I know
partial.
what you're talking about. I've been in a bunch of these Zoom meetings today, exactly, but I don't see it.
If
on
you
my-
don't put your cursor on it, it might disappear. You might
I'll
have to
keep
move
touching.
the cursor in that area.
Okay, I'll keep looking. Thank you.
Otherwise, we're not.
We're not receiving any comments from.
Okay, great. You know, one thing that I did neglect to ask the applicant is if she has had a chance to review all of the conditions associated with this application. And Ms. Wall, if you're listening, are you able to comply with all of the conditions pertaining to this application?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll bring it back up to the commission for questions or a motion if you so desire.
There weren't actually any conditions, were there?
No.
No?
So,
Let's see.
yeah,
Staff
I didn't see any conditions on there. I was just making sure I didn't miss something.
Okay, nope, you're right. You're right. I just saw 3 above there and yep, they were just statements. So
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
grateful the applicant could apply with nothing.
Thank you, Scott.
So,
Thank you
but
very much.
with
It
that,
was complying with the conditions that were brought to the
Right.
commission last
Right.
meeting.
She has
exactly.
already agreed to that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property located at 296 East, 4500 South from GO General Office to CD Commercial Development.
Can I second that motion?
Thank you, Lisa. I have a motion by Scott Woodbury, a second by Lisa Milkevich, that the planning commission forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property located at 296 East, 4500 South from GO General Office to CD Commercial Development. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Mr. Woodbury,
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Nay,
Yes,
Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Good luck with your project on that property map.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item, number 5, is Murray Burton Acres amended subdivision. It is located at 349 East Wilford Avenue and 412 East Afton Avenue. And Susan Nixon will be presenting this to us.
Thank you. This request is on behalf of Raymond Poole and J&G Investments, the property owners of the 2 respective properties. They're both located in our R18 zone. Originally, the subdivision, they're thinking in our R18 zone. The one lot fronts onto Afton Avenue, the other fronts onto Wilford Avenue. Back in 2000, Mr. Poole purchased the southern portion of Murray Burton Acres, that you can see on the map there, which used to be part of South Bellevue. The name was later changed to Afton Avenue. So you can see lot 18 is where we're talking on Murray Burton Acres. In 2000, Mr. Poole purchased approximately 5,200 square feet from the owner and did this by recording a deed, and subsequently built a sport court on the property. He then recently approached the planning division and asked if he could make this a buildable lot, and would like to, his intentions are to build a home on the property. We informed him that the lot did not meet the zoning requirements and would need to somehow adjust the property line and go through the formal process for approval with the planning commission. Any lot line adjustments do require per state law and our city code that the land use authority, which is the planning commission, must review any boundary line adjustments that are in a platted subdivision. So based on that, Mr. Poole, since the property did not meet the minimum area required of 8,000 square feet per lot, he applied for a variance, and the hearing officer reviewed that variance on May 13th and ultimately approved that variance based on this neighborhood. In fact, specifically along this street, over the past 20 to 30 years, there had been 6 prior variances with very similar situations. So having obtained that variance, that gave Mr. Poole the potential for the southern lot at 349 East Wilford to have a square footage of 7,388 square feet. And the original lot at 412 East Afton Avenue would have 8,119 square feet. And it's basically, they are transferring 2,723 square feet from the Afton Avenue parcel to the Wilford Avenue. So based upon obtaining the variance and meeting the lot line adjustments, staff is recommending approval for this. Jared's now showing you the property for it. This is the Afton Avenue parcel or property here. And you can see that at the back, there's a detached structure, which I believe will remain. I'm not sure exactly that. Actually, excuse me, that will have to be removed. And then, did you show them the?
Yes, it's a sport court there.
And this is a photo of the property on Wilford Avenue. The home on the left side of the one picture is Mr. Poole's existing home. He actually lives right next to the property at 341 East Wilford Avenue, and then the sport court is actually 349 East Wilford Avenue. Based on the information and receiving the variance, staff is recommending approval subject to 3 conditions as outlined. And we did send out approximately 57 notices to surrounding neighbors and actually received no comment or concerns from the neighbors.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Any questions from commission members for Susan? Pretty straightforward project, I believe. So, Mr. Poole, are you in attendance tonight?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you state your name and address for the record, please, and provide any additional information that you might think is helpful to us?
Raymond Poole. I live at 341 East Wilford Avenue, and I'm applying for a lot line adjustment so that it can become a buildable lot.
Okay.
I have already applied for the variance and received that because the lot that I'm suggesting, or the lot that I will have, will actually be about 10 feet deeper, or approximately 700 feet larger than my home sits on. So it'll be a very nice building lot.
Okay. Are you aware of the 3 conditions associated with this application, and are you willing to, and able to comply with them?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions from commission members for the applicant? Okay.
No.
Seeing none, again, as I said, I believe it's a very straightforward application. I want to compliment you on the appearance of your house and the sport court lot, and I'm very familiar with that area over the years, and it's always been an asset to the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to open this agenda item up for public comment at this time. We'll take a minute or so to see if we have any email comments from the public. There have been no comments received prior to the meeting tonight, so take a minute. We have anything coming in, Jared or Susan?
No.
No.
No. Okay, I think we're safe in closing public comment for this particular agenda item. And I will bring it back up to the commission for additional comment or a motion if you see fit.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposed lot line adjustment for Lot 18 of the Murray Burton Acres subdivision at the property addressed 412 East Afton Avenue and 349 East Wilford Avenue, subject to the two conditions 1 through 3.
Thank you.
Can I second that motion?
Thank you, Lisa. I have a motion by Sue Wilson and a second by Lisa Mokevich that the Planning Commission approve the proposed lot line adjustment for Lot 18 of the Murray Burton Acres subdivision at the property address 412 East Afton Avenue and 349 East Wilford Avenue, subject to the 3 conditions attached to this application. Call for vote, please.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Mr. Nay,
Yes.
Mr. Woodbury,
Yes.
Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck with moving forward with this, Mr. Poole.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Now moving on to agenda item number 6. This is also a subdivision project. We have the Applegate condominium subdivision amended. And Jared, now should I also mention agenda item number 7, and this presentation will deal with both of those. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and also agenda item number 7, Applegate Townhomes PUD subdivision. And Jared Hall will be presenting this tonight. And we have received a lot of comment pertaining to these 2 agenda items, and we will be reading those into the record at the appropriate time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And so what I'm going to do is, with the slides that we have prepared, I'm going to start with the Applegate condominium subdivision amended, if I can talk, and move straight through. Although I've prepared slides and a recommendation slide for this item, I'm going to move from it right to the Applegate Townhomes planned unit development portion, because the comments that have come in are all related to that portion of it. So, but the one can't exist without the other, and I'll explain that momentarily. So the Applegate condominiums are an existing condominium project, 770 West Applegate Drive. What you can see right there is Applegate Drive. This is 700 West or Murray Boulevard, and 5400 South, just to put everybody in the same place. The zoning on the property is RM15, medium density residential. That's about 12 units the acre is what it typically allows. You can see the zoning around it is R18, and we'll be talking about that some tonight as well. We do have a mix of zonings in the area: general office, neighborhood commercial, and standard commercial development across the street. To give a kind of a background on this particular project, the proposed amendment to the Applegate condominiums essentially is to do 2 things: to carve out 5.07 acres. I can't stop seeing it now. It's kind of shaped like a rabbit. It's the lie right there. Kind of helps you identify it, if that helps you identify it. This is the 5.07 acre portion. And this road that you're seeing here is a dedication. That gets dedicated as a part of that 5-acre subdivision in order to serve the new planned unit development subdivision that's on the heels of this application.
Meaning that becomes a public street, correct?
It becomes a publicly dedicated right-of-way. And so does this other portion that leads to it across the existing Applegate condos as well. So the existing Applegate Drive that serves it right now is private, as we saw back in this overhead slide. This is Applegate Drive and it's private. It gets realigned and dedicated like that in this subdivision in order to serve other units, and it becomes dedicated as a public right-of-way to the city. That's an important part of all of this. But this doesn't get constructed right away. The existing right-of-way will stay in use during a first phase of the subdivision. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But I did want to point out that you're seeing a new dedicated right-of-way as part of this subdivision, crossing Applegate and into the new acreage right here.
Jared, just because you're on the topic at the moment, and it's not all of us are as informed as you are.
Sure.
Could you share for a second not the nitty gritty, but the quick difference between a private road and a public road? Just public
you
road.
bet. You bet. So right now, the private road, Applegate Drive, has to be maintained by the condominiums, and its use is exclusive for the condominiums, and everyone that uses it is using it at their permission. We don't further subdivide on private roads in Murray. So if they wanted to go forward with this, we required them to dedicate this public road in order to make the subdivision happen. And what it means is then that Murray owns the road collectively. It becomes a public right of way. The sidewalks are public. The road is public.
So that means it's plowed by Murray and maintained by Murray?
Plowed and maintained by Murray City at that point, and used by Murray for whatever other purposes.
However, the new road does have to meet city standards also in order to be a public road.
Correct. We don't accept dedications that don't meet public standards. So, yeah, that's the nutshell version. Is the city would own it after it's dedicated. So that's this portion of the application in a nutshell. And I wanted to, this is a good moment to kind of explain something that came up in a lot of the comments that I'm sure we'll be reading in a few minutes. This particular subdivision, and this is just a zoomed in version of that 5.07 acres. This particular subdivision is in order to create a parcel that can then be re-subdivided into townhomes. What we are recommending tonight, and what's being applied for tonight to the Planning Commission, is a subdivision approval for this portion, this one split, to create the 5.7 acre piece, the 5.07 acre piece. That can be approved preliminary and final in one meeting, in one consideration. The planned unit development subdivision, the larger subdivision, the 48 townhomes that we're going to talk about in just a moment, does not get all approved tonight. The request is for a preliminary subdivision approval, and then that those 48 townhomes would be built in 2 phases that both have to get recorded before they can be built, and they have to be approved for a final subdivision individually as individual phases. So those individual phases, phase 1 and 2 that we'll talk about again in just a moment, would come back to the Planning Commission for final approval. So this is a preliminary and final for this alone. The 48 townhomes are not on the agenda for preliminary and final approval tonight, just to make sure that's clear to everyone.
Right. So we're just breaking out this property in order to enable it to be developed in the future.
That's exactly right.
And that is this agenda item.
That's eligible for, that's this agenda item, and it's eligible to be approved in one motion.
Okay.
In one meeting. The rest of it is not. So these are our recommended conditions for that, and I'll just brush over them real briefly. That subdivision, simple as it is, does have to meet the requirements of the city engineer to get a plat recorded, which include providing an appropriate amended declaration of condominium withdrawal for the recordation of the amended plat. And then the applicant needs to meet city subdivision requirements, and those are extensive. That includes the road dedication and making sure it meets all standards, et cetera. The applicant also needs to prepare that final subdivision plat to comply with all those requirements. We'll come back to this because right now we want to move on to the other 48 townhome subdivision that would result if this is allowed. And then we can review this again when you're ready to make motions. So item 7 on your agenda is the Applegate Townhomes Planned Unit Development Preliminary Subdivision. As I mentioned before, that is going in on that rabbit-shaped piece. It's preliminary in front of the Planning Commission tonight only, and it does also require conditional use approval as well. So there'll be 2 motions to make on this item tonight as well, if it's to be moved forward toward final. Again, it's the same area that we're talking about, that existing road. The zoning is RM15. Planned unit developments, multifamily developments are allowed in the RM15 zone with that conditional use permit for the planned unit development aspect of it. This is the proposed preliminary plat. This is Applegate condos as it exists, and there are condo units up here that you can't see on your screen. Where it jogs around right here, we'll see in just a moment on the site plan, is the existing clubhouse and pool. And the existing road right now comes in just like this from 7th West, but stays along that west, or I guess it's kind of the south and west property line until it cul-de-sacs in here. The proposal for this subdivision is to dedicate, as we said before, this road, Applegate Drive, but shift its alignment in dedication. 2 other things have to happen to do this. You're seeing in these outlines the 48 townhome areas that can be sold as townhomes. They're mostly in 2s and 3s. There are a couple of 4-unit buildings, but the 48 of them are, generally speaking, the large majority are in twin home sort of a setup. The site plan will show you kind of a little better. Again, the entrance and exit to the subdivision are from Murray Murray Boulevard or 700 West. Engineering requirements and subdivision requirements required a second exit from the project for this many units. It actually required it already for the 172 units that are in Applegate existing. The proposal to meet that requirement is to take, and we'll talk about this again a little bit more in detail, is to take existing Rome Beauty Drive and take it out through the pod of condos here and to Glendon Street to provide that second access. This cul-de-sac, as it's realigned, this is Gravenstein Park right here that goes up to some more condos and dead ends. As we move the cul-de-sac, we still provide that, and there is a sort of a service road that can be used for utility maintenance and to preserve the utilities that are in this area. This is emergency access if it were ever needed. It's not open for vehicles. There are bollards that would be placed there, as you can see here a little bit better, but that would provide a pedestrian access through from the neighborhood to the west and south up through Applegate, but not a vehicular access. Another portion of this that's added, a new road, is not public. It's private road here, but it is a loop from the public road at Applegate onto Rome Beauty. That's better for emergency access, fire department, et cetera, and just for general vehicle circulation to get more people maybe out the Glendon Street side and keep some of the pressure off of Applegate Drive. That's the goal there. In this slide, you can see better the clubhouse and pool amenity. The amenities of Applegate condos with the proposal would be shared with the new townhome development. That was a question that was asked as well. Planned unit developments require an amenity. Part of the deal between the HOA at Applegate and the buyer and developer of this piece would be the sharing of this clubhouse and pool amenity, and the new buyers would be participating in a rehabilitation of this clubhouse and pool area to make it nicer and to make it serve the two projects together more completely. We have required sidewalks throughout to get people around on foot through the project and access some of the open space. There are a lot of beautiful open spaces in Applegate currently. A lot of it's currently. A lot of it's being taken up by the townhomes proposed here. Again, more landscaping will be added all around them, and that's part of the proposal. We do need a landscaping plan. You'll see that in your conditions. We need a full formal landscaping plan before we move anything to final subdivision review and approval. This is just to show you the phases. I think it's important that we talk about the two phases now. Right now, as we said before, the roadway runs along this west and south property line. That would stay in use to serve everybody during construction of phase one, which is just these units on the north and east side of that road. Phase one would also include the installation of the private loop road, some parking, the rehabilitation of the clubhouse, et cetera, but that's a separate deal with the Applegate condos. And the extension of Rome Beauty through to Glendon Street needs to happen in phase one. That's an important component that we've added in the conditions of approval. So that's all what happens in phase one. Phase two is, I'm sorry, I didn't go back. Also during phase one, while this road is still in use, existing Applegate, the new alignment of Applegate gets constructed to serve them, because in phase two, the existing Applegate Drive that's been realigned now gets removed, and the remainder of the units are built along that south and west side of Applegate Drive. So the phases are fairly simple. Most of the construction and installation of improvements happens during phase one. Any questions about that? Okay.
I just have one comment. I noticed that they proposed to name the street Rome, what is it? Rome Apple.
Yeah.
Can we maybe make that less confusing and have them choose a different apple besides Rome, since we've already got Rome Beauty? I mean, there's a lot of apples. Jonathan, Fuji, Brayburn. I mean, there's a lot of apples, so that it doesn't overlap. Because I would think even for the fire department, that could be problematical if they're out on a call to differentiate between Rome Beauty and Rome Apple.
That's a good point. And it does come up in subdivision sometimes. Right now, preliminary, I think the best example I could give you is that we just 2 weeks ago approved a subdivision where the name of the road changed, because as it went to county to get approved, and as they applied for that name, county rejected the name. They changed the name.
Okay.
Fashion Cove, or it changed from Fashion Island Cove to something.
Oh, that's right.
Fashion
Okay.
Creek. That happens. It happens usually between preliminary and final. Because we-
Okay.
And there was some public comment on that.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure we will read into it as well.
It's a good point. It usually gets corrected as they apply for the names to use.
Okay.
But good.
But
question.
Jared, just for clarification though, that isn't, and that's not something that we do. That happens when they apply. So we don't really have say, right?
We usually let the county dictate that. If they need to change the name, I try to stay out of the names generally. Just a quick comment. There were some questions in the pre-meeting about the cul-de-sac here. Again, Applegate Drive will still end in a cul-de-sac, although it's realigned a bit. The cul-de-sac that you see here lets you go through the cul-de-sac and onto Gravenstein that takes you up to some more condominium units that exist already in Applegate. This is that small asphalt access path it's mainly for utility work to be done, although it could serve for emergency access if it's needed. You can see that this is not provided for vehicle access. Generally, there are bollards there that can be dropped for emergency vehicles only. These units that get placed here are just the other side of a large area that is used for retention in the project thus far. The grading and drainage plans are still being reviewed and they're being reviewed, and there might be some changes to those as we get to final, but right now the plan is for retention in this area for the project for stormwater. So you have a large open space here. Most of that amenity will really be some walking path and then retention. We do have sidewalks all along Applegate Drive as well. I think we're going to look at that next. Yeah. Applegate Drive is a standard city minor collector, 60 feet wide, with park strips and sidewalks on both sides, curb and gutter, to meet city specs. And when we talk about some of the comments, we can talk about whether or not Applegate needs to be 60 feet wide. I would say, just before we get into that, even this has been looked at for a long time. The city engineering division has been insistent that it is a minor collector and that it be 60 feet wide to handle the traffic we expect on it just from the units that are served by it, although it doesn't go out anywhere other than out to 700 West. But we can talk about that and move forward with some of those conversations.
Jared, do you know if a street, it's a public street 60 feet wide, would that allow for on-street parking?
It would. So if you look at these lane widths, this is 2.5 feet of curb and gutter. You've got the park strip, 5.5 feet, 4 feet for the sidewalk. There are 18 feet of asphalt on each side of the center line of that road. So that's a 10-foot travel lane and an on-street parking easily.
So if on-street parking were eliminated, the actual travel surface of the road would be the same.
Yes, that's true. Even if we just eliminated parking from one side of the road, travel could be, you could add 8 or 9 feet to the roadway easily.
Okay, thank you.
Some of it is just travel width though, and I don't like to speak too much to that because it's not my bailiwick. But Trey,
I'm not an engineer either, and I don't even try to play one.
Yep. Trey and I can have some conversations about it with the planning and engineering divisions. We can look at some of those possibilities. It would allow some parking on street though.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Rome Beauty extended to Glendon Street. We already talked about this, but as you can see, this is how it exists currently, that pod kind of, and the driveway extends around. It's really kind of a driveway and it goes around the circle, lets you get to your parking and then access your units. To extend that to Glendon Street, you take that straight through that middle portion, that island. There was some comments about whether or not we could keep the landscaping. There might be ways to do that. At the very least, we could keep landscaping on both sides of the road, or we could run the road to one side. There are some challenges with that. But we can look at possibilities, and then it takes that private road out to Glendon Street that's public, and that again is one of the subdivision requirements we need to meet. It's a better view of it. It's just tipped on its side a bit, but you can see it running through that landscape area. Just to the bottom of it, sorry, just right here you can see just the end of Rome Apple Road, or Granny Smith, or Jonathan, or whatever it winds up being called. That's this connecting loop that comes through from the new dedication of Applegate Drive, runs right through to Rome Beauty. It allows access to these units on Rome Apple, allows access to some additional parking here that can serve the project as well as the clubhouse needs and pool. And this was very important to fire department and emergency access or emergency services, that we provide a loop through to get folks in and out a little more easily right there. They were concerned about the lack of access between Rome Beauty and Gravenstein all the way down to the end. The units that are being proposed, again, we'll need some more detail on this as we get to final. When they come in for final subdivision, PUD subdivision approval, we'll ask for some more materials or different variants that might be used, and they'll have to identify all of those to get them approved. But these are, just to talk about the units, all the units are front-loaded, 2-car garage. These are 2-story units, 3 to 4 bedrooms, and all of them are front-loaded garages. So there's ample parking in the project. That was a concern as well as we started looking at the project. Some architectural elevations here, the rear elevations, side elevations. But this is the basic unit, the Vista, that Fieldstone is proposing to build in the project. Fieldstone would build all the units. These are not individual for sale. It would be a cohesive project. Floor plans, go ahead.
Jared,
Mhm.
those 2-story condos would have to meet the same height requirements of the 2-story houses around them. Is that correct?
Well, the height allowance actually in this zone is 40 feet. But under planned unit development, the planned unit development allows the planning commission to vary different requirements, but it also allows them to impose other requirements. So the units that get approved are the units that have to be built. So if the planning commission, as part of this planned unit development, feels like the 2-story units are what are appropriate as opposed to 3-story townhomes, for example, then 2-story townhomes are what are allowed, period. They don't get to change the plan later on and decide they want to do 3 stories without coming back and asking for a modification. Staff, as we went through the project, as we went through the process, has felt like the 2-story was more appropriate, and a lot of the design is based on that. It accommodates the 2-story with the front-loaded garages more easily. Does that make sense? So you'll know exactly what units are being built when you're done with a final approval. Right now, this is the proposal, and yeah, the height allowance is actually 40 feet in the RM15 zone. These units are not that tall. Clearly, at 2 stories, they're probably 18 feet or so. The floor plans, again, your main living space is on the ground floor with the garages and then the bedrooms upstairs. And we are recommending with a host of conditions that this project should be moved forward with preliminary approval. That allows a couple of things, and I just want to touch on real quickly. Preliminary approval gives them the ability to finish out some of the questions that have been asked, to finish answering those questions that we've had as staff, and to move forward toward final in the 2 phases. We do feel like as a planning and engineering staff, as a city staff, that we have the right information, that we've answered the questions as best as we can at this point, and that it's appropriate to move forward with a preliminary approval. As you can see, these are the engineer's conditions. There are a raft of them, including that I just want to point out one thing I should point out to make very clear, including that we'd like to see an increase. They've worked with us to increase the distance from these units, 10 and 22, from Rome Apple, just to give it a little more distance, a little better sight line as people are using this road. It's not it won't be a major road, but it is a road that's going to see use from a couple of dozen units. We'd like to see a little more distance here. There's ways to do that. It'll shift the site plan just a little bit. The engineer and I are still asking for that in the conditions. There are a lot of other things that still need to be done. Some of these questions have been answered. Some of these conditions have been met by the current plan that you're seeing. We always leave those in place so that we don't lose them as we go forward to final, so that they're still in place even if the site plan gets changed as we move forward. There are 9 conditions in all, but 2 of those conditions have subsets. The water department, there were some questions about utilities, and I wanted to touch on this too, so there's a lot of stuff to try not to forget in this project. The water department is asking for an 8-inch main line out to 700 West, a new 8-inch water line to meet the main on 700 West, and get an abandonment of that old main. There's some questions to answer about how the master meters will work. It'll be a little bit of a challenge, but it should be overcomeable. There's a utility line in the existing Applegate Drive that has broken. Several residents expressed concern. I had a conversation on the phone with a gentleman the other day about that line, and he was concerned that maybe if that line was going to go away or be repaired. That line's in Applegate, and Applegate's getting realigned, so that line will be replaced, and that's what we're talking about here with that 8-inch main. So there should be an end to the flooding issues that have happened from that line. Those are our recommended conditions. One other thing to make note of, and I wanted to make sure this was clear. Condition number 9. I'm going to run back up to the site plan in just a moment. There is an existing cell tower, and there has been a variance granted by the hearing officer to move that cell tower to its old location, down near the intersection of 5400 South and 700 West. It has not been moved yet. It must be moved before a final phase, before either of the two final phases is recorded. The way I stated it in condition number 9, I didn't want to leave any room for doubt about what I mean by that. Phase 1 final or phase 2 final cannot be recorded until that cell tower has been relocated to its new position, because cell towers are not allowed in the RM15 zone, and you can't, it's tied up in the way the variance works. Not to be too lengthy about it.
I believe it was originally styled as like a flagpole. when
The
it was
flagpole,
first
yeah.
erected. Okay.
Yep, it's going to move back to the position of the flagpole, although it will be a new pole situated there instead of the flagpole we used. But that does need to happen before any final comes back to you, so that'll be a condition we want to see imposed. Those are our conditions of approval. Those are the ones that we're recommending. Again, just to reiterate, there's a conditional use approval that needs to be granted. The same conditions have been applied to both that conditional use approval and the preliminary subdivision for the PUD. Again, both phases would have to come back to you for final subdivision review and approval when they're ready for that, if they can meet these conditions.
Okay. Well, with that, are there any additional questions right now from the commission members for staff? Or if not, we can bring the applicant up as well.
I just have one
I just have-
quick question here.
Okay.
We have that other development down next to Hunter's Woods that was brought in front of us as sellable units.
Yes.
And then those ended up being rentable units.
Right.
Do we have any kind of leeway where we can request that these be sellable units? Or do we, or no?
Well, we don't have the authority to demand that units be owned or rented. Individual people can make contracts with each other. So an HOA can require only a certain number of rentals versus home ownership. We can't as the city. That would be unconstitutional for us.
I just
The
mean like
project-
as the development as a whole, because I feel like if we go ahead and greenlight these townhomes and then they end up being basically apartments, it just to me, it kind of defeats the neighborhood aesthetic of Applegate.
Sure, and I can understand that concern. I don't know how to address it other than to say that the project as it's proposed is a conditional use to allow the PUD subdivision, not to allow multifamily apartments. So if they want to make that change, they'll have to come back to you and make the case for a conditional use permit to allow the rental units instead.
Okay, all right.
Have another chance at talking them out of it, at least for that.
Okay.
purpose.
All right, thank you.
That makes sense?
Other questions?
I have one more question. So Jared, what are the widths of the side roads, the smaller roads?
That's a great question. I wish I had that right in front of me. I can look that up for you while we do other things, but I don't
That'd be
know
great.
in my head. I'll do that.
Okay, and Jared, I have a question for you concerning the authority of the HOA to act on behalf of all of the property owners in there. There's been some communication that's come to us in that this was discussed like 3 years ago, and that's when the vote was undertaken to approve moving forward, pursuing this type of a project or that. Do we have, any information? I mean, can the HOA just come to us and say they represent all the property owners and this is what they want? Or how do we know that that's an accurate reflection?
That's a great question, and it's one that we asked actually as well as we processed these applications. And the legal opinions that came back for us were that we had to accept the applications at face value, that the risk was being assumed by the applicant and not us, that the HOA clearly has authority to act on behalf of the homeowners. That's not really the question. The question is, did they really vote to allow it? And are they acting appropriately? And we don't have a way to know that. Someone would have to sue for that. We don't have a way.
Okay, so if someone disagrees with that and they say this is improper, then that's a problem between them and the HOA officers.
Yeah, there has to be a different recourse than us for that. We have to accept the application as signed by the HOA board.
All right. Thank you.
Ja-
I appreciate it.
Jared,
Thank you.
Jared, have we heard any feedback from residents in the Applegate
Yes,
condos
yes, there has been a couple.
to say that they don't agree with it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I remember seeing a couple, I just couldn't remember. So I want to
Yeah.
see if we find any more.
We'll be reading comments from
Okay.
both sides of that issue on it within Applegate and outside.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, if it's okay, I would like to ask if the applicant is present this evening.
I think I've got them muted. Let me unmute them.
Okay,
Sorry.
that would be helpful.
Oops. And George. And
Okay. Is the applicant present tonight?
Fieldstone is the applicant. I'm getting the way started. I'm getting that one there. How do I? Can you hear me?
A lot of feedback.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's better.
Yes. So could you state your name and address for the record, sir?
Yeah, my name is Quinn Miller.
Are Quinn and George in the same room?
I'm in a separate room. Let me move.
Yeah, I can't follow this.
Because that's typically the feedback is when you have two people in the same room.
It's too many people muted. It's like, oh, you need to know what else you talk to.
Is that better?
Sure. Yeah, let's try again. Name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Quinn Millett. I live in, you want my home address?
That would be great.
City? I live in Salt Lake City, 1441 East Redondo. Fieldstone is the applicant, but they asked me to give a little history prior to when they got involved.
That's great. We would appreciate any additional information.
Okay. I'm a real estate investor in the Salt Lake County area. I've been familiar with Applegate for a long time, very fond of the development. I'd driven through there several times, seen that open space. You could kind of see the need for repair. A friend of mine is Tyler Buswell, who is one of the top HOA attorneys in Utah. He's a partner at Curtin & McConkie. He and I chatted about how they could raise money, and it was essentially the plan you have in front of you. I brought it to the HOA board 3 years ago, and they decided to push forward with it. So there was a special vote held. Of the people, the residents that voted, nearly 80% voted in favor of this. At that point, I put together a team, a civil engineer, a surveyor to do some of the initial entitlement work, including the cell tower issue. And then at this point, Fieldstone is in charge of the project, and yeah.
Okay. Well, since you are representing the applicant tonight, are you aware of the 9 conditions attached to this? And it's substantially more than just 9. A couple of them have several sub conditions attached to them as well. But are you aware of those? And are they able to comply with those conditions?
I'd defer to Fieldstone on that.
Okay, I would really like an answer from somebody on
Absolutely.
that.
So this is Matt Loveland. I'm with Fieldstone Homes. I'm happy to state my address as well for the record. It's 12896 South Pony Express Parkway in Draper.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you guys taking the time this evening. Quinn, well, this is a unique project. There's quite a few different things that you typically don't see with your standard development. One being that an HOA is involved in the seller side of a transaction. So Very unique, and there's going to be a couple things that'll have to be ironed out over time. But from Fieldstone's standpoint, we're really excited about this project. And to speak to your question, Commissioner, yes, Fieldstone is aware of the conditions before us. We have a couple questions that we just like clarity on. I'm not sure if now is the time to ask some of those specifics, or if that would be a later time.
Jared, it depends if they're technical, I guess. That would be a city staff question, but.
Of course.
We can try to answer them if you'd like, and if we need to defer them, we will.
Absolutely. So the first one, I think, just P, and that's on the previous slide. It states that the current 172 unit development should have 2 access points from 2 roads to meet current city code. Additional units added to the development should have additional access points from separate roads, where the proposed density should be reduced. A lot of the conditions on here are fairly black and white, and this condition, just to be totally honest, I need to understand what is trying to be conveyed here. What is truly the requirement? Because from Fieldstone's standpoint, the way that we see it is we have the 700 West access, the Glendon access, and then even the emergency access from Spring Clover. And so I would just like a little more clarity on what we're agreeing to with this requirement, if the site does indeed have sufficient access for all 172 and 48 units, or if there's an issue related to that.
Okay, Jared?
I can speak to it in some ways, but ultimately it's the engineer's condition, and I do not modify those when he gives them to me. I leave them in place. That was a topic of conversation for some months, whether or not we were all right with 2 full accesses out and one partial with the emergency access only. My understanding as we moved this forward to preliminary was that was the case. Trey tends to leave the conditions in as a safeguard, but I would defer Matt to have you talk to him, but I don't recommend modifying any of his conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, be clear that, or understand fully that the site does have sufficient access. And we can have a few more follow-up conversations with Trey, but that seemed like a pretty big point that I wanted to explore.
We'll probably want to, and I can understand that. I guess my assurance to you would only be that it wouldn't be in front of you for preliminary if we didn't feel comfortable with the way the accesses are being addressed at this point.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's where I didn't think that there was an issue. So, but just wanted to get a little clarity. The second point is number 9 there on the second slide.
Right.
So Jared, you did actually a really good job, kind of, because this is complicated. That first phase is pretty heavy. We have a couple different plats they're going to record. The one that I just wanted a little clarity on is with that cell tower relocation. So talking process. Right now, all of the common area is an individual parcel. And actually, Jared, I love that you pointed out that there's a rabbit, because now we're going to unsee that. So the rabbit plat, let's call it that for a moment, that will record, or at least it's anticipated that will record prior to Fieldstone taking title to the property, because we can't subdivide a parcel. It would be an illegal subdivision, right?
Correct.
So that plat, the expectation is that it will record, and then Fieldstone will purchase the property from the homeowners association. At that point in time, the homeowner association will take the funds from the proceeds from the closing and use a portion of those to relocate the cell tower while we are developing the phase 1. Phase 1. And so I guess my question is, the restriction on recording a plat, is that specific to the residential phase 1 that has 28 units, I believe?
Yes, it's specific to either of the 2 townhome subdivision phases, not to the initial 5.07 acre carve out.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You bet.
Okay. Any other questions, clarifications, or information you'd like to provide to the commission, sir?
No, those are the two that I just want a little bit more clarity on, so.
Okay. Questions from the commission for either of the applicants?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and maybe it's not for the applicant, maybe something needs to be addressed by the staff. That brings a little concern to me that the responsibility for completing number 9 actually falls on the HOA. I know ultimately it's the applicant's responsibility because he's committing to it, but if I understood correctly, he said that the HOA will use funds to do it on their own dime. And I know it will hold up the project, but because of that. But I guess, is this the way the condition has to be written? Is that the way you understood that it would be, as the responsibility of the HOA and not, I guess, the applicant? Or can you expand on that, Jared?
Yeah, I can. So we did understand it to be the case that the HOA would be moving the cell tower. It's part of their larger agreement. There's a lot of moving parts, as I've got bits and pieces of them involved in the agreement for the sale of this property. So the HOA not performing on moving that cell tower will negate the sale, as I understand it. So it'll be important for them to do it. We've processed actually the hearing officer's variance to allow them the moving of the cell tower. The only thing that would keep them from performing on it would be not being able to pay for it at this point. So I'm not concerned what happened. We just are concerned about the timing, because it needs to stay legal and there's specific requirements from the variance.
Right. Okay.
In Fieldstone, we have very similar concerns around that, because we need to make sure that it is removed in a timely manner so that our project is installed. And with our arrangement with the association, those funds will actually be held in escrow and will pay the cell tower company directly. It won't come from the association. It will come from a title company, a third party that will facilitate that. And then they have timelines that they have to meet. So we've done our best to try and think through that, but it's a great concern and question. So.
Well, yeah, thank you for the clarification. That makes me feel better to know that the funds for that is held by the escrow company and not at the discretion of the HOA.
Right.
That actually helps a lot. So thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Any other questions for either of the applicants? Okay, well, with that, I would like to open this item up for public comment. And Jared, how do you propose, reading into the public record the emails that we have, or dealing with comment that we have received prior to our meeting tonight?
That's a great question, and smarter minds than mine have decided how that will go. So we have a number of comments. They have been arranged, and tell me if I get anything wrong here, okay? They have been arranged in the order they were received.
Good.
And that way, it's almost as if we were recreating what would have been the public hearing. So we'll start. Melinda and Susan have decided that I read too fast and mumble too much, so they're gonna do the reading, unless one of them passes out, and then I'll take over.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm just grateful that I don't have to read them.
You and me both. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out in there. Let's just text. I don't want to do it.
I'll be reading the first of the comments. So if everybody that's not, this will be a little bit tricky because we're all in the same room. So if everybody who's not actually speaking from the applicant side and such can be muted for a moment, we'll read through these and try to answer what's necessary as we go. All right.
Okay. We'll read them in the chronological order that we received them. The first one is from Natasha Whitaker, received on May 13th. It says, to whom it may concern, the proposed development within Applegate Town Homes is something that will greatly benefit our community. It will allow us the income to do much needed repairs so that our community can again be proud of our townhouses. The building and selling of this land is essential to improving this community. The next one was received from Nick Grandgroff and Jonathan Agosto, yeah. And this was received on May 15th. Why is the grassy area in the middle of our circle, Rome Beauty Park, being removed? See the screenshot on the site below. So it's this little triangular area here. I don't know if you can.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Can show you the.
Right here.
Yes, okay. This is used often by existing residents, and it is a great amenity for us and our dog. There is already an asphalt road that goes around the grass area in front of our carports. So why would the grass be removed for a road? I understand the road will connect to Glendon Street, but again, we already have a road that goes around the grass. We are losing other grassy areas around our community with the construction of these units. So the grassy circle will be even more important to us. The next comment he makes is, we have concerns of privacy with the location of the parking lot and the new condo units. For our reference, our home is highlighted below. The parking lot would be directly behind our back deck with direct view to the windows in the back of our home. We were not comfortable knowing that our windows would be in constant view of future residents and their guests. Have other locations or configurations been considered to maintain our privacy? The third comment he says is, also there is a large tree directly behind our home. We do not want this tree to be removed. Are you able to confirm that it is not in the plans to be cut down? And the last comment he says, lastly, what is the function or purpose of this open area in the back corner of the property? We are losing some common area in the middle of our community, so why aren't units being built back there instead of the middle of the community where we currently have amenities, grass, playground, tennis court, etc. The open area in the back corner seems less accessible to the majority of the community. And this is that triangular area, Jared, if you can show
Sorry.
up where I believe that's
Here.
the detention pond
Yep.
area.
Yep.
That's where he's referring to.
Yep.
Retention property, excuse me. Okay, and then it just says, we appreciate your time in reviewing and addressing our concerns. And the next public comment was received from Ron Dunn, and this was received on May 19th. He is a resident at 5320 Majestic Village Circle. And his comments say, the Applegate Development Project has taken quite a path to arrive at this stage where the non-resident dominated HOA has requested both the preliminary and final approval to occur simultaneously. This began as a supposedly harmless HOA request to change the zoning in case a fire occurred and the landlords need to rebuild their rental units. Insurance would not pay for the rebuild if the zoning was out of compliance. That was the cover story the HOA gave to the planning board at the time in a somewhat contentious meeting. The planning department employees claimed that the zoning request, for the reasons stated, was all that they could consider. No one publicly believed it except for the HOA, who, as time has shown, had an ulterior motive. The poorly run HOA has had 3 major embezzlement scandals over the years. The last one, immediately before the rezoning request, resulted in a loss of more than $100,000, in which the treasurer needed money to pay for his wife's cancer treatments. After the embezzled money was spent for medical treatment, the cancer patient still died. Applegate ranges from a third to over half rental units, depending on who is talking, an HOA board member or the residents that I have met after the meetings held at City Hall or in chance contact at church. The HOA, according to my church member friends, is dominated by non-Murray resident landlords who are unwilling to reimburse any portion of the embezzled funds originally intended for badly needed exterior improvements to this poorly maintained condominium complex. The unhappy landlords developed a different plan beginning with the zoning change under the pretext of a possible fire. The truth finally emerged when the 2 well-compensated suits from the Curtin McConkie law firm stated at a hearing before a planning department employee that the unsightly cell phone tower had to be removed from its current location to its original location in order for the development project to continue. Now what we suspected but never acknowledged previously became part of the official record. Although I and several others spoke against the cell phone tower move, the request was rubber stamped in record time. The two suits prevailed, even though they don't live in Murray, and the unidentified developer at that time was not Murray-based. For reasons that the planning development can best provide, Murray voters / taxpayers who live next to or near the proposed project, or who tried to be initially involved beginning with the smokescreen zoning change, have been sent to the locker room before the game has ended. At the beginning, many of my neighbors joined me in attending the meetings. I have attended all of them and spoke when permitted. The number of neighbors in attendance has decreased considerably. When I ask why, they respond, there is no point. The decision has already been made, but just not officially announced. Even if they are correct and the fix is in, I will be optimistically, albeit perhaps naively, spend time preparing my input for the Thursday evening meeting, although I may go to bed Thursday evening thinking that the time spent opposing this project really was a waste of my time. My neighbors and I purchased homes built in 1978 and 1984, built between 1978 and 1984, in what was assumed to be an established neighborhood. Now Applegate, complete with its self-inflicted financial issues, wants to change that concept by imposing a construction zone environment on its neighbors. Applegate was built in the mid-1970s, and all was well until the last 2 years or so, when the non-resident dominated HOA sought a way to bring in revenue to improve their units at no expense to the landlords. Besides the noisy construction from the two phases, the proposed 2 units to be built on the top of a small incline will overlook the existing homes. The packet described how zoning rules will be altered when needed. What is the purpose of zoning, especially when Applegate was just rezoned, if the rules in question are easily violated? Case in point, the setback requirement from the property line specified in the zoning classification will be waived, apparently at the builder's request. The free lunch that the landlord-dominated HOA seeks will come at the expense of the surrounding neighbors, whose quality of life and property values will decrease, although their property taxes won't. The packet did not include any mention of the impact on the neighborhood schools, specifically Horizon Elementary, which already has 3 portable classrooms and serious traffic congestion at the beginning and end of each school day. Incidentally, Horizon is no longer a neighborhood school, but more of a commuter school, with the attendant problems such as the congestion that was never factored in when it was built. What impact will the proposed development have on Horizon and traffic congestion on already busy 700 West? The packet contained no mention of either concern. The packet fails to mention if the Murray City Police Department will have the resources required to intervene in the congested 700 West area where additional traffic will be problematic. For reasons of the Applegate HOA and its developer's patron can best answer, for the request for both preliminary and final approval seems rushed but convenient. To allow input from Murray citizens and voters requires a deliberate process in which the approvals should be separated. Puzzling as well, the developer and the planning department have had months to collaborate on this project, while the neighboring citizens / voters have all of 4 days before the planning commission meeting to submit comments since the packet was first posted to the Murray City website. That seems conveniently hurried with the intent to minimize critical input from the adversely impacted neighbors. Such a development would work in the Fireclay neighborhood where no long-term residential neighbors exist to be affected. That is not the case for the Applegate's proposed 48 townhome unit addition. Therefore, the request as proposed in the packet should be denied. That was from Ron Dunn. Then Melinda will take the next couple of public comments.
Yeah, I'll mute this. Sorry. Mute.
Okay, this is.
I'll turn my volume down, you turn your volume up.
It's all right. Either or. Okay.
Nope, it's gonna have to be yours, all yours. Sorry.
All right. I think we got it. So this comment was submitted from Gerald Anderish, and it came to our department on May 19th, 2020. To the Murray City Planning Commission and Murray City Attorney Civil Division. The public meeting of the Murray City Planning Commission scheduled for Thursday, May 21st, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. violates the Utah Open Public Meeting Act. We contend that closing the meeting to the public while not providing space and adequate facilities for allowing monitoring and public comment violates sections 52-4-201, 52-4-202 of the Act. Simply inviting the public to view streaming of the meeting and or email questions to the commission does not meet the Act's compliance requirements. There are a number of Murray residents who do not have access to the internet nor have the capacity to view streaming video. One of my neighbors who lacks those resources called the city and asked how he could participate. They suggested finding a neighbor who has an internet connection. That is unacceptable. This is an open public meeting that clearly excludes a critical portion of the public. The planning meeting will be approving a subdivision of a large urban property and greenlighting a huge 48-unit, multi-story townhouse project. A project that will profoundly affect property owners like my neighbor, whose back door is literally yards from this proposed construction. Past meetings on this issue have drawn large capacity crowds of concerned Murray residents. To simply say, quote, COVID-19, unquote, fears allow the city to ignore the Open Public Meeting Act and the legitimate right of the public to participate is more than unfair. It's a violation of law. We demand the meeting and decisions on this issue be postponed until either threat of the virus has subsided or required accommodations for the public are provided. To exclude citizens from monitoring and participating in the meeting invalidates the democratic process, a process which the Open and Public Meeting Act was clearly designed to protect. No threat from any virus should set aside the rule or spirit of law. And again, that was from Gerald Anderish. I'm also going to read a response that the city attorney wrote to that public comment. Since it was specifically addressed to the city attorney and came into question violation of laws, we felt it was appropriate for the city attorney to respond and then read that into the record as well. So this is from Mr. G.L. Critchfield, the city attorney, and his response is dated May 20th. Dear Mr. Anderish, we are in receipt of your email dated May 18th, 2020, and an undated hand-delivered letter delivered May 19th, 2020 regarding the Planning Commission meeting scheduled for May 21st, 2020. You indicate your belief that because this Planning Commission meeting is scheduled to be held electronically, the meeting will violate the Open and Public Meetings Act and should either be held as an in-person meeting or postponed until citizens can attend in person. We appreciate the civic passion that is evident from your message and your desire for the Planning Commission to hold an in-person meeting. We are aware of the interest generated by the agenda item to which you are referring. Land use matters are very important to our residents and equally important to city staff. We take these matters very seriously. However, we do not share your opinion that holding an electronic meeting under the current circumstances and given Governor Gary Herbert's Executive Order 2020-5 violates the Open and Public Meetings Act. In fact, Governor Herbert has specifically authorized public bodies, this includes the Planning Commission, to meet through electronic means throughout the duration of the public health emergency. On March 18th, 2020, Governor Herbert issued an executive order pursuant to his authority under Utah Code annotated Section 53-2A-209, 1B, and 4, suspending enforcement of portions of the Open and Public Meetings Act directly related to and necessary to address public health emergency. As a government entity, we have the obligation to be compliant with applicable health orders and guidelines. Holding the meetings in an electronic format allows us to be compliant. Electronic meetings are not unique to Murray City. The Utah legislature passed a joint rules of resolution authorizing the legislature to meet electronically during the current public health emergency. Based on the governor's executive order, it is our understanding that most counties and cities in the state are temporarily holding meetings and public hearings remotely via electronic means. It should also be noted that most courts, including the United States Supreme Court, are currently holding court hearings electronically. During this public health emergency, the city still provides appropriate resources to allow the public to participate in meetings. The meeting can be viewed online and public comment is able to be provided to the Planning Commission. The public notices also included contact information for city staff who can take comments verbally over the phone and relay those comments back to the Planning Commission. The city is seeking for inclusion and participation in these meetings while seeking to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public during this temporary public health emergency. I will recommend that your email be read into the record to the Planning Commission so that your objection to holding the meeting electronically is duly noted. Sincerely, GL Critchfield, City Attorney. Got another public comment that was submitted by Laurel Brown on Wednesday, May 20th. Dear sirs, my single concern about the proposed plan for Applegate condominiums is in regards to the name of the proposed new road. Naming the road Rome Apple Drive when there is already a Rome Beauty Drive seems very confusing. To continue with the apple theme, one would think there might be dozens of other apple varieties from which to choose. The proposed names will cause confusion for package deliveries and the Postal Service, not to mention residents and visitors. Sincerely, Laurel Brown. Have another comment submitted from Jane Anderish. It was, I don't see a date here when it was submitted. 5/20, okay. May 20th. She submits a photo and says, here's a photo of the land to be used for the proposed development. The lush green urban forest mature trees will be bulldozed to make way for 48 townhomes. My question to you is, how does this planned development fit with Murray's master plan that promises to preserve and expand green spaces within the city? Again, Jane Anderish. Okay, I'm going to read one more. This is from Laurel Haskell. It was also received on May 20th. Regarding agenda item number 7, conditional use and preliminary planned unit development, PUD subdivision. 1, PUDs must provide an open space amenity. What is the open space amenity in this PUD? The only space appears to be a detention area required for stormwater control. The existing clubhouse, if being considered, is outside of this development in the Applegate condominiums development. 2, staff recommendation 1D states that the triangular area that extends into Spring Clover Drive be dedicated to the city and that area be removed from the density calculation. Public roadways are removed from density calculation. How does the dedication of Applegate Drive affect the density? If that right-of-way is removed, does the density exceed the allowed 12 units per acre? 3, several questions regarding traffic. Where is the existing irrigation ditch in relation to the proposed Rome Beauty Park connection to Glendon Street? What is the spacing to existing accesses, including those into Glendon Way condominiums across the street? What is the spacing between the proposed roadway and the existing Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint parking access? In regard to Applegate Drive, staff recommendation 10 requires a traffic impact study. If the study makes recommendations on proposed or current access, how does granting preliminary approval now affect the ability to require those recommendations be followed? Applegate Drive is proposed as a minor collector, which according to Murray City standards is 1,500 to 3,500 average daily trips. If average daily trips are found to be less than 1,500, at least beyond the intersection with Rome Beauty Drive, the road could be narrowed to a residential 50-foot right-of-way. Doing this would gain 10 feet. This would allow for a rear yard setback of 25 feet rather than the proposed 15 feet. 4, in regards to proposed setback variances, the proposed rear setback in the southwest against the existing R18 homes is smaller than proposed rear setback on the northeast against the existing Applegate condominiums development. This is likely due to road alignment and/or grades, but is it possible to shift the road northeast to reach the required setbacks on the southwest against existing homes? If grading is an issue, have walkout basements instead of a second story been considered on those units? Have these and all other options been fully explored before recommending a variance and setbacks? Again, that was from Laurel Haskell. Now Susan's gonna take a turn.
This comment was received on May 20th, and it is from Applegate homeowners. Signed, this is signed from the President, George Cowan, Vice President Lindy Reed, Secretary Alex Higham, Treasurer Natasha Whitaker, and Member at Large Lisa Hoffman. The letter states, Dear Murray City Planning Commission, if you have driven through Applegate at any time in the past few years, you have probably wondered what has happened to the beautiful complex that once was. Applegate, as it currently stands, has some major repairs, both structurally and cosmetically, that needs to be addressed. However, due to past circumstances, the complex is unable to fully address these needs without some sort of intervention. So instead of letting Applegate deteriorate further, the HOA found a solution. The proposal is to sell 5 acres of our land came over 3 years ago and was voted on by the Applegate community through a special vote. Nearly 80% of the Applegate residents who cast a vote did so in favor of this project. This proposed development, known as Community RRR in Applegate, will enable our community to improve the structural safety of our homes while simultaneously improving the cosmetics of the property as a whole. While the HOA board understands that the loss of land as an open space will be hard for the community and surrounding neighbors, it will ultimately lead to an improvement in their lives and safety of Murray residents, both inside and outside complex. It may be hard to see now, but addressing these safety issues and cosmetic eyesores will lead to increasing property values to all homes in the area while providing yet another beautiful and well-maintained neighborhood for Murray residents to call home. The HOA board fully supports this project and have worked tirelessly to see its success. We, as the HOA board of Applegate condominiums, ask that you vote in favor of this project and help us restore Applegate to the beautiful complex that it is meant to be. The next comment received from George Red. He's a resident at 5326 South Majestic Village Circle. This was received on May 20th. From the summer of 2018 until the present time, we as homeowners living within 500 feet, in quotes, of the proposed expansion, residents of our neighborhood have attended meetings, protested, and opposed the proposed development project known as Applegate Townhomes PUD. Our efforts have been ignored in favor of a few non-resident owners of units in the Applegate condominiums. I have attended many of the meetings regarding the changes requested. It is my observation that the vast majority of attendees have opposed the requested changes in zoning, and yet they have proceeded to be approved. My feelings and opinions have always been that most of the federal government officials are mostly corrupt and driven by money and influence. I have been of the opinion that local governments are an exception and are responsive to the needs of their local constituents. That has changed as I have witnessed the proceedings of the various meetings. At one of the meetings where the opposition was probably 15 to 20 against to 1 in favor, as I was leaving the meetings, there was a Murray City official standing in the exit door. I asked him why this meeting was even held, as the decisions had obviously been already made in the pre-meeting, quotes, of the Planning Commission. His response to my query was, quote, because we have to, unquote. No, not so the residents who oppose the actions could be heard, but, quote, because we have to, unquote. Our concerns are many. And he quotes, what about the impact on traffic in the area in Spring Clover Drive, if Spring Clover Drive is connected to Applegate Drive? What is the impact on property values for those of us who have lived in the area for over 30 years? I feel values will go down while property taxes will not. What is the impact on the already overcrowded Horizon Elementary and the added traffic congestion on 700 West? The proposed two-story units will be overlooking the existing homes. Rental units, as evidenced by the deterioration of the Applegate condos, drive residential values down, not up. The proposed units will suffer the same fate as the existing ones. Murray City seems to be highly in favor of approving high-density apartments. Fieldstone Construction and Management Services will take their profits and leave us to live long-term with what they have left behind. End of quote. It is possible for ordinary citizens such as we are to even begin to decipher the miniature scale, quote, amended, unquote, map provided to us. The detail printed is impossible to read and make sense of. I believe this is part of the strategy used to move forward in spite of the objections of the majority of residents. The notice sent by you is calling for preliminary and final subdivision approval at the same time. How can something be preliminary and final at the same time? My fear as the 37-year resident of Murray is that certain minority special interests of mostly absentee owners and profit-minded contractors will prevail over the rights of the loyal long-term residents. I ask you do the right thing and do not allow this development to be approved and go forward. And that was from the Reds, excuse me. The next one is from Laurie Gallegi. Hope I didn't slaughter that name. Apologize if I did. This was received on May 20th. I live in Applegate and originally voted for the townhomes. When the residents asked questions about the townhomes, we were told the plans were still getting worked out. All of a sudden, I received the plans in the mail from Murray City, and I'm now worried about the amount of space that will be taken up. The residents have not been updated, and I don't feel many of us would say yes if we could vote again. I'm hoping we will be updated and we can re-vote before any building takes place. I moved into Applegate over 30 years ago because of the space and green grass. As I look at the map, I don't see a lot of space anymore, and I feel the town homes are being squeezed in to take advantage of the land. I feel it is only fair that we have a final opportunity to see the property plans up close and to have a re-vote, making sure that this is what the majority of residents want still. I don't want things sugar-coated to find out this is not what we are looking for. Thanks. And I have one more. This is from Deborah and Paul Ning, and they are residents at 5330 South Majestic Village Circle. This was received on May 20th. Dear Planning Commission, we are submitting updated formal comments regarding the Applegate Condominium Subdivision Amended Project number 20-052 and Applegate Townhomes PUD Subdivision Project number 20-039 for the May 21, 2020 public hearing. Item number 1, we understand that the zoning for Applegate was recently amended. However, the new design setbacks of 15 feet violate the 25-foot requirement. Many of the homeowners along Majestic Village Circle, including myself, are the original owners. Our homes were built in accordance with the zoning requirements without exception. Therefore, the new development must be held to the same standard. Otherwise, it is very clear that the zoning was a mere exercise to set up the end goal for ignoring zoning requirements. Item 2, we understand that there will be an initial phase 1 to be followed by a phase 2 at some later date. Due to the growing economic recession with an uncertain future, we are requesting that the developer provide safeguards in the event of failure to complete both phases. Specifically, we are concerned for dust storms from permanent, unprotected, rough graded, bare earth should the development fail and go into bankruptcy. The developer should either 1, leave the unused existing road and landscaping to remain as is, or 2, provide permanent lawn/landscaping until phase 2 is ready for construction. The third comment, communication tower needs to be relocated to 5400 South and 700 West by the existing flagpole. This location is situated where property values will not diminish while providing the income Applegate needs. Item 4, we also request that the new exit for the PUD off of 700 West be the only option. Exits into Glendon Way will create congestion at the stop sign entry into 700 West. The current condition is already difficult during rush hour. Item 5, the PUD should show the impact from the new facility to the Murray School District. Current urban development in Murray has overwhelmed the local schools. This is evident by the impromptu modular classroom units already in place to solve existing overflow of students. Item 6, request 8-foot fence on the boundary to be erected to limit visual intimacy into the existing Majestic Village subdivision from the 2-story townhomes. Full description of landscaping on the west side should be provided to include mature trees per Murray City ordinance. And item 7, the Applegate amended plat does not appear to include the land needed to build the new inlet/outlet on Glendon Way. The road is outside the boundary line. Did Murray City sell this land to Applegate? If so, what did the city receive for it? We request written response to our comments. Sincerely, Deborah and Paul Newman. And that wraps my comments up for now, and Melinda will take some additional ones.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, this comment came in on May 21st, and it is from Alma Haskell. This is comments from Murray City Planning Commission, May 21, 2020. Alma Haskell, 5287 South Clover Meadow Drive, Murray, Utah. Agenda item number 7. I request that the Planning Commission ask the applicant for more information and continue this item. I am supportive of the previous rezone and can support the application pending resolution of 1, building height setback impacts, and 2, PUD open space amenity issues evident in the proposal, both of which I will discuss in further detail. 1, PUDs are a tool that developers and cities use to get a better product than the standard zoning requirements allow. The staff report details conditional use review standards. Conditional uses should not be detrimental to ... general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity, or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity. Also, the proposed use will stress quality development with emphasis towards adequate buffering, landscaping, use of appropriate gradation of building height away from single-family districts, and density to create privacy and compatibility with surrounding uses. There is a 6 to 8 foot finished grade change from the new road to the fence on Majestic Village subdivision. If the new driveways are approximately level with the road, it makes the back of walkout basement. Oh, it likely makes the back of a walkout basement. This, plus what it looks like to be about 19 feet or 2 stories, makes for a full row of buildings that form a 20 to 30 foot tall wall that is 15 feet away from the property line along the whole existing subdivision. This does not take into account the pitched roof on top of the wall. That does not seem like an emphasis to adequate buffering and appropriate gradation of building height away from single-family districts or compatible with surrounding uses. In fact, it could be injurious to the adjacent property. It is the burden of the developer to show that a 15-foot setback is better than a 25 usually required, and part of that should be mitigation of the impacts on the existing properties. Has the developer given staff and the Planning Commission a clear picture of this impact? Is it acceptable to have such a visual impact made worse by having it 10 feet closer to the property line and mitigated only by a row of trees that will take years to mature? If it is not acceptable, other mitigations need to be explored. The trees are a good start. Likely the best mitigation would be to require these 18 units be limited to 1 story with a standard walkout basement instead of a 2nd story. In her comments, Laura Haskell suggests another possible mitigation that involves reducing public street right-of-way by 10 feet pending the required traffic study and increasing the backyard. 2, the staff report states that PUDs must provide an open space amenity. Is the open space provided enough of an amenity to meet that condition? The only open areas provided are in fact the retention areas, which are more of a development requirement than an amenity. Additionally, the plan removes a good deal of open space from Applegate, the tennis courts, and landscaped open grass yards. Yards are what usually provide open space. The developer should be required to show an open space amenity that is better than the usual yards required in the code. Perhaps a few units could be replaced with an open space that would benefit the families and the children of development at Applegate, such as a playground area or something similar. A PUD is a conditional use. The exceptions that a PUD are not given, or that the exceptions that a PUD allow are not a given. It is necessary that the developer show how the proposed exceptions are better than what could be developed in compliance with usual codes. If the impacts I have discussed are mitigated in an amenity provided, this development will benefit the area, the existing Applegate residents, and hopefully the developer as well. Thanks for considering these comments. Additional thoughts for staff that do not need to be read into the Planning Commission meeting, although I'm going to do it anyway. Does the city really want to take the dedication of this right away? As a PUD, I don't think it is required that we do. The only real benefit is that the pedestrian connection from the existing neighborhood is made on a public right of way, but an easement could be required for this if the city does not want the right of way. It is fine if the city does want to take it on, as long as it has designed and rebuilt to city standards. It is probably a plus for existing neighbors that they do not have a street immediately adjacent to their back property lines. What will happen to the existing catwalk path from Lucky Clover to 5300 South? If the new pedestrian connection is made, that could likely be vacated to adjacent properties, though it may be worth keeping anyway. If the new pet access is for some reason removed, the existing connection should be kept and maintenance clarified. Scouts have been clearing debris from it as a service project for years, but it is not fully adequate. Does a 12-foot path meet the emergency access requirements? It is smaller than I would have thought is needed, though I have been out of touch with these types of requirements for years. An easement to the city for public access and the path and emergency access needs to be recorded on the plat. This and other new development in the area is increasing the student load on Horizon Elementary. Can planning staff have a conversation with Murray School District about adjusting boundaries so more empty elementary schools to the south or east could compensate for some of that impact? Does this connection to utilities impact the existing neighborhood water lines? I see that Murray Utilities required new 8-inch lines. Does this make breaks like the recent one that happened on Lucky Clover any more or less likely? Will it affect pressure flows? I know utilities has considered all of this. I am just curious. Thanks, Alma. Okay, we've got another one from Christine Dunn. It was received on Thursday, May 21st. The Applegate Development Project has been an interesting experience from this homeowner's perspective. At the first meeting I attended, we were told the only reason for the rezoning request was in case a unit caught fire, it could then be rebuilt. During that meeting, the statement was proven faulty and changed. Since that point, I have learned that when money is involved, you can pretty much get whatever you want accomplished, and rules are not that important, but more of a gentle recommendation than a rule. Case in point, the cell phone tower. It did not meet requirements when it was first requested on the corner of 54th South and 7th West. So a variance was required and granted. This happened again when it was moved to the center of the property, and now for a third time it is moved back to the original location. So why do we need requirements in the first place? All you do is say those don't meet my needs, so give me permission to change them. Then requirements are changed. Easy, right? So now the real question for all these changes is the units to be built. I have accepted that they will be built and the money may or may not end up helping the original Applegate condo units. However, and this is a major concern for me, the ability to request a change in the setbacks setback distance included in the zoning change says to the neighbors, the zoning really isn't important. It is what the builder wants. To go from 25-foot setback to 15-foot setback is a huge difference. It will definitely impact the privacy of my neighbors and their property values. The ability to have the kind of impact does not show value to any set standards, and the Planning Commission seems to dismiss requirements when it is convenient for the builder. Please explain during this meeting why the standard regulations that meet zoning requirements can be waived to meet the builder needs. Again, that was Christine Dunn. I have another one from Chantel Erb that was also received on Thursday, May 21st, which is today. Hello, I am a homeowner in Applegate condominiums, and I have some questions, comments regarding the Applegate subdivision amendments. Will the city still require an additional road into the community? Previously, the board told the residents we would need to bring a road in where the gully is off of 700 West, and we would bear the cost. Who would have to pay for this? Will the city require existing safety issues in the community be brought up to code as part of the development? Or will code enforcement only ensure new buildings are up to code? Thank you for your time. I plan to watch the meeting that will be streamed tonight. Chantel Erb. Just have a few more. Any more come in? Okay. Oh, okay. So all of the comments that we have read to you this evening so far were provided in advance to the Planning Commission meeting because they were submitted prior to 5 o'clock today. So just so the public knows, the Planning Commission had a chance to see those and review those prior to the meeting tonight. We do have, I think, 3 more that have come in after 5 p.m. tonight. So this is the first time the Planning Commission will be hearing these. We have, I think, this might be another one from Jane Anderish, and it came in 5:38 tonight. She says, my central concern about this project is the lack of adherence to the minimum setbacks for the proposed townhouses. As you can see in the enclosed Fieldstone Homes overall site plan, lot number 48 is clearly located only 12 feet from the property line. This is less than half of the required minimum distance of 25 feet. Do the zoning requirements mean anything? Why are they not being enforced? Again, Jane Anderish. We have another one from Jonathan Agosto. It says, why is the parking lot on Rome Apple extending further than the area that would be purchased? And then we've got one more from Chantel Erb. Says the voting outcome was 87% of the votes cast were in favor, but we were never told if 67% of the weighted vote of all owners was met. As a homeowner, I have been unable to view the vote on selling the property. I was instructed to contact SEB Legal. I contacted SEB Legal and they had no idea what I was talking about. Thank you, Chantel Erb. Have we had any more come in? No. I think that is all the comments that we have for these 2 items. Mute.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Melinda. That's a lot of reading. You and Susan did an excellent job. I appreciate it. And I'm happy that you did mention that, except for about 3 of those that came in late today, we have had copies in advance. And I communicated with the commission earlier today, and everyone indicated that they had a chance to review those prior to the meeting. So that is an important consideration. Now, Jared, how do we want to address some of these items that were brought up in these communications and that? I don't think it's possible to go line by line through all of them, but I'm open for suggestion.
Probably not possible to go line by line. And I do think that we, I will say that I think we addressed a lot of them in the conversation.
First of all, I'm going to close the public comment period.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, now we're back to you.
I do think we addressed a lot of them in the presentation, but I can go back through just a couple of quick notes without taking too long.
Please.
That's a few, and then you guys can ask any questions for follow-up
Okay.
if I'm missing anything important. Is that fair?
I think that's the best option.
Okay. There was a question. Several people mentioned the school district, and I thought I would, including the first commenter. I thought I would just address that now if I can.
Please.
So we do require planned unit developments to get approval from the school district, or to be reviewed and get a letter of accommodation basically from the school district. And we did receive that on May 15th from the Murray City School District. Rock Boyer sent a letter saying, I'll just read it so that people know that this was sent. It was in regards to the condominium subdivision. We provided them with the plans. We are pleased to welcome one of our newest communities to the Murray City area, Applegate Condominium PUD subdivision. This residential community is located off of 770 West and Applegate Drive and is currently in the planning and development stages. This new development will include 48 new townhomes. Fieldstone Homes Development have been in contact with Murray City School District regarding their new community. Murray City School District confirms its capacity to accommodate all children coming from the 48 new townhomes in the community. Again, Rock Boyer, Director of Support Services for the school districts. This is and I will just quickly follow that up by reiterating what we've talked about many times as a planning commission. There is not a school district in the valley that is not under pressure from population growth. That doesn't come from the building of multifamily units, as many people suspect, but rather from population growth. Whether we put those people in trailers or in homes or in condominiums or townhomes, as is proposed here, they all have to be educated, and that's the school district's responsibility. And they always rise to the occasion. There was mention of the mobile units. That's common throughout the valley. That's how the school district handles crowding and overgrowth until they're ready to add to their facilities. So I don't have any concerns about the school district here. They've been on top of every project that we've proposed.
Great, thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Another quick question. It was mentioned that, and I'm just going to point this out here, there was some question about this open space, and I know we talked about it briefly as a planning commission. There's the lawn up here where Rome Beauty goes through. Why does it have to go straight through the landscaping? Why can't it just be left like this and then routed around? Why can't it go around the way it does now? The short answer to that is that the engineering requirements for this access is being provided out to Glendon Street for a very specific purpose, to meet an engineering requirement in the subdivision ordinance that there be a certain number of exits to accommodate certain numbers of units. And that needs to be a passable, good, viable exit. And to support that, engineering and planning suggested that it be straight, and this seemed like the obvious way to do it, to take it through the middle of the pod. We can provide landscaping on either side. And we can look at other options, but we did consider those kinds of things as we looked at it. This was what we felt was the best way to handle it. It will divide that landscaping, won't remove it entirely. Travis, as long as I'm thinking about it, before I forget, Commissioner Ney, you asked about the width of those private roads, 26 feet of asphalt, and then curb and gutter.
Thank you.
No, it's a significant pass through, but it's a lot less than the 60 down here on Applegate Drive. It's out of order in terms of the requirements or in terms of the questions, but as long as I'm thinking about it, I won't forget it. The entrance to the church property is right here next to where it comes out onto Glendon Street. That was more or less unavoidable. It's not ideal, but in looking at it with the civil engineers from developer's side, our engineering division felt like that was the best alignment available to us. There was another question about the property in this area not being owned by Applegate, and did the city sell it to the developers for this project? The answer is we did not sell it. It was not city property. This is Applegate property out to Glendon Street. There's another parcel that's actually owned by them. That'll pass through. So there's not been any sale from the city to anyone to facilitate this development. In fact, all we're going to do is accept a dedicated right-of-way for the first time in 40 years. One other question about that alignment, as long as we're talking about land that we're not accepting and land that's outside of the subdivision boundaries, there was a question from Ms. Haskell, I believe, about the density of the project, 48 units. 12 units to the acre is the density that's allowed, and the planning commissioners, I know you know this because it's in your report packets. 12 units to the acre is what's allowed in the RM15 zone. We do not vary densities when we change any kinds of setbacks or anything else that we approve in planned unit developments. The one thing that there are two things we never change in planned unit development reviews. The first being uses. If nuclear power facilities are not allowed in this zone, the PUD doesn't let you build a nuclear power facility. You don't get to vary that. And the second is density. The underlying base density of the zone, as it's calculated, we do not change. 12 units per acre is what's allowed in the RM15. And this is a 12 unit per acre project as it stands alone. 5.07 acres is being purchased. About an acre is removed to dedicate this road and then to take these portions out of the subdivision boundary, and you end up with 4 acres, 48 units. It's a very simple calculation when it's all said and done. So in answer to the question, the roadway in calculating the density was removed from the property as a density calculation. One other quick thing, there was mention about the traffic study, and would we be able to make changes to this particular road in the event that the traffic study suggested that it were possible to do that? I don't have that. I can't answer that question. Anything is possible, and we would certainly, if it were possible to narrow this road and provide a bit more setback along this property line, which is the tightest and most problematic of them, we would certainly welcome that opportunity. As we move forward from preliminary to final subdivision, I'd be happy to keep entertaining that possibility with Trey, with the city engineer, as we look at the traffic studies. But we need to have those things done first and have more conversations with the city engineers. What I can say is that at this point, the 60-foot right-of-way is what engineering has felt like is necessary for this development to be served appropriately. Let's see. There was some question about privacy, a number of questions about privacy, and we can kind of try to address those all together, if I may. There aren't, and whether or not we had looked at all the possibilities that would maybe be better for privacy for different parts of the project. We did look at several different configurations. This is by no means the first and only layout that we have seen as a staff for the city. It is the only one that hit all of the points that needed to be met on the developer side and the city side for requirements. So there might be an ability to increase this setback somewhat, and there was a mention of the 12-foot in the one of the final emails that just came in during, and I've looked at that. That is true. This one corner is 12 feet from property line. That's an adjustment, a small adjustment that we could make and meet 15 if 15 is the final allowed setback. 15-foot setbacks for townhomes, multifamily units, is a fairly common rear yard setback for townhomes. It does create some issues for existing housing. They are not unique issues between existing housing and proposed housing. They are common in almost every single project. I don't know how to get away from that other than to suggest that 15 feet is a setback. It's not 5 or 8. Adding some to it would be desirable if we're able to do that.
Jared, in our packet, it states the standard is 25.
Correct.
And 15 is proposed. That is what catches me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in planned unit developments, we always have that kind of standard. For example, in the River Park townhomes that were recently done, the rear yards that we proposed and approved were 15, and the same standard applied because it's an RM15 zone, but we were able to modify those with the planned unit development. It's not a given. That's a true statement I think that Alma made. It's not a given. It's supposed to be an approval that has to be granted and considered. I guess what I'm saying is, as the planner that reviewed it, I feel like 15 is appropriate in this case. If we shorten to 15, it's got to come from somewhere else. The most likely place has already been identified. It comes from the roadway here to make that work.
Jared, can I ask you 2 quick questions?
Sure.
The, what'd you say, River Park condominiums that you just referred to, those are the condominiums just north of Hunter Woods?
Correct.
So they back up to a river,
Yeah,
not
some
their
of them
houses.
do. There are some that back up to the other condos there. To the other,
Okay. And then the other question, tonight is not a final say on the setbacks, correct? We're still early in that process.
yeah, this is preliminary. If you've decided if there's another option and they should take that and you decide that they should, then that can be adjusted at final. Absolutely. This is a preliminary approval.
Jared, fencing or a block wall was also brought up. And what is the ability of the planning commission to address that?
So, and that it is common in subdivisions for us to require, especially between single family and multifamily projects, to require some sort of physical barrier, usually a masonry wall. Typically 6 feet in residential situations, but because of the change in zoning, you can require something like the 8 feet that was suggested. I know it's not always
I thought we could only go to 7 feet, but
without a permit, but in a PUD, you could do the 8 feet.
okay.
So that could be required as well. We have not discussed fencing on this portion. I do think that's worth discussing. At least a 6-foot masonry fence should be considered.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that you wanted to hit from the comments that seem to be common themes?
Well, I do want to just one more thing about the 15-foot setback here along this property line that's problematic. There are a couple of things that help to mitigate that. Mitigate what it could be. This is not one solid wall of buildings. There are 10 feet between these buildings, so there is some spacing, and they are not as tall as apartment structures would be that this zone does contemplate. So it is higher density residential property development than certainly is occurring on the other bordering subdivisions. However, the overall project, I think I have in your packets a calculation of the density of the overall project. This is 12 units to the acre. It's significantly higher than those surrounding, but it's not 30 and 40 and 50 units to the acre where we would see those kinds of heights. So we've zoned it in a way that the city felt comfortable with the kinds of densities that would come in and the kinds of heights of buildings. So I would recommend that those are appropriate, and they're understanding there are always issues when those kinds of uses collide.
You know, excuse me, but with regard to the buildings and, you know, the townhomes and the proposed height and that, it's probably more expensive, but there's been a lot of talk tonight about walkout basements, single story with walkout basements. And what it brings to mind to me are the Brad Reynolds properties on Vine Street that abut Murray City Park. They are 1 story with walkout basements. It's beautiful development, very low impact, and that was a major part of that project that enabled the community around there to accept those rather than have 2 and 3 story, building designs. Has that been considered? Is that something that we could,
I can't really speak to that. I'm not aware of this grade is. I'm not sure that this grade is such that it would allow walkout basements if you commit them to single stories, usable walkout basements, when a lot of that first floor, because of the areas you're talking about to achieve a 12 unit per acre density, a lot of that first floor is garage that you're seeing here. So I'm not sure I can't say that that's a viable option. I just don't know.
Okay.
Jared, what wasn't it, the Brad Reynolds was a PUD and that,
It
correct? Was. Yeah, that's what I thought. And that was one of the compromises essentially.
It was. Brad Reynolds project. Cottages on Vine was a planned unit development. The difference here is that they were single family detached homes.
Right.
So
right.
And the incline to the rear of those would absolutely allow walkout basements. In fact, 2 of them in a couple of cases. So there were second stories with. Anyway, this is not quite that kind of an incline. I'm not sure if that would work or not, but that's not something that I can say we've explored.
And Jared, just for clarification, when we set height standards, is that from the highest point of the land or the lowest point of the land or the mid? Where's that height standard from?
The grade.
Grade?
Grade,
So
yeah.
Grade the back of the house or grade the front of the house? Oh,
The foundation of the home. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Any other, sorry, let me make sure I didn't miss anybody's comments really quickly. There was
those were the major,
that was pretty much
recurring themes that I seem to hear quite a bit. That, and of course, property value and impact on the neighborhood. Those, I understand that as well.
Absolutely.
I have one question, and it's really, I think I already know the answer, but the guest parking, it's a shared amenity between the 2 projects. And so that's how you can have it on the 2 different parcels.
Thank you, Travis. I really appreciate it. So that's exactly right. So these cross that boundary, and that was one of the last comments. For exactly that reason, they're a shared part of the amenity, just like this will be shared between them, and just like these accesses out and through will all be these projects are going to be separate. The Applegate Townhomes PUD and the Applegate condominiums, but once they're constructed, they're sharing a lot of amenities, and they're going to be intimately tied together.
Okay, do we need to get input from the applicant, Jared? Do you think that'd be appropriate, or?
Whatever you feel like, yes.
I would like to hear his comments concerning some of the comments that have been read into the record tonight. If he would care to comment and offer any additional information, it would be helpful.
Great.
Absolutely. So Matt Loveland here. Let's just stay on the topic of the rear yard setback concept. When the team was looking at how best to lay this out, part of the process that we went through was we actually pulled the plat from the I believe it's called Majestic Circle, and those are the residents to the south.
Majestic Village Circle.
Correct. Yep. So we actually pulled that plat, and we found that though the code states that it's a 25-foot rear yard setback, that actually those homes were built prior to 1987, and as stated within the code, they have a 15-foot rear yard setback, and that's actually indicated on the plat as well. So we felt like the spacing, we were actually just matching the rear yard setback as it's currently enforced on those existing residents. So I hope that kind of gives a little clarity on why we started with the 15. And I believe with the PUD, I mean, it can potentially be a 0 lot line. Is that fair to say, Jared?
It could be, but again, as has been pointed out, and I think rightly so, it's not a given. It's a negotiation to achieve designs that are better and to,
of course,
to meet certain goals. And in this case, the goal is to create missing middle housing, this kind of semi-attached, lower middle density multifamily housing that the city needs to meet its requirements for affordable housing.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background for the Planning Commission on why we went with the 15-foot. I actually really like the question or recommendation about the size of Applegate. If there's an opportunity where you can still get sufficient utilities and have access and have a potentially a little bit smaller right of way to increase that setback, I'm all for exploring that. I think it could, help those residents, and also for my units, the homes that we're going to build there, I think it would help us as well. So
also, just by eliminating on-street parking, that may create a better situation as well for the road width.
Yeah, and on the on-street parking, I mean, all of these have 18 or 20-foot driveways, right? Or the majority of them do. And so in addition to the parking up on the northern loop. And so there's quite a bit of parking within here. And so even if we had to restrict parking on one side in order to pick up some of that additional acreage for that rear yard setback, I mean, Buildstone, we're happy to explore some of those things. I think that's reasonable as long as it ties out from the engineering standpoint.
Yeah.
Mr. Loveland, can I ask a question? Is it appropriate for me to ask a question now, Chair?
Absolutely.
Just for my clarification and understanding of what you said when you pulled the plots for the Majestic Valley Circle, this is part I need clarification on, were the setback regulations 15 feet or the houses are actually set back 15 feet?
So they actually vary because there's a little bit of a curve within there. There are some that are greater than that 15 feet, and there are also a few that appear, we haven't surveyed it, of course, but based on what we can scale out with aerials, which are pretty accurate within a foot or two, there are a few that appear to be close to that 15-foot mark. So.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
So I have a question also. So have you explored any more about this idea of having walkout basements on that southwest side where we've been talking about the 15-foot setbacks, and if we could get rid of some of the parking and have better opportunity to have one-story homes with full walkout basement?
We have not explored that, no. With, as Jared mentioned, where this is for the missing middle, if you will, one thing that you would sacrifice with this would be the bedroom count, square footage within the unit. And so that's something that we would have to analyze and look at. The second thing, just specific to the walkout component, is in order to design appropriately for drainage, you can't force walkout situations, otherwise you'll end up with flooded basements. And so there has to be a substantial amount of fall from the right-of-way down to that property line, even just to build a walkout. And we're in the preliminary stage. We just haven't gone into that detail yet. But it's something that will, as we further the engineering of the site, that we will absolutely explore. The question about the 1-story versus the 2-story, I feel like it would be tough to accommodate that, just given the size of the units as they currently are. But it's something that we can look at. So.
All right. Looks like Travis is having issues with his sound, so hopefully he can get that resolved.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Did you just
Okay.
call in?
Yeah, my phone died.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great. Well, no, we can hear you, and sometimes that's better for all of us. Let's see, Jared. Well, hey, it's been a long evening. A little levity never hurts, and he's a commission member, so I'll take that shot. So, well, Jared, do we have any other input that we need to do prior to extended discussion with commission members?
I believe so. Or we haven't received anything else. I think we've covered pretty much the comments that were made.
Okay. Yeah. All right. The one thing that I would like to restate, because we do have multiple agenda items for this particular overall project dealing with the Applegate condominiums. The first item we will be dealing with is basically just carving out a section of their existing lot, their existing plat, and designating that as a PUD. And that is the preliminary and final that we have been talking about. Is that not correct?
That's right.
Okay.
The preliminary and final
After that has been resolved, either positively or negatively, then we will move on to preliminary approval of the design that has been submitted for the actual development, correct?
Correct. Preliminary only.
Okay, now between preliminary and final, what kind of things can change?
Realistically, if there's a really huge change, like if we realigned all of Applegate Drive and added 6 units because they acquired more property or something, we would bring that preliminary back to you. Short of that kind of change, if it's adjustments like we've been talking about tonight, if we were to be able to eliminate parking on one side and talk the city engineer's office into shortening the width of the road, to narrowing the road, creating more space back here, that kind of alignment change is not something that we'd need to come back for preliminary for. We would just bring you the final showing that kind of change.
Okay. And
Mr. Chairman, a question
yes.
for you. It looks like the first piece is the carving out of the amended subdivision, but it looks like recommendation number 1 is actually for the conditional use approval.
Actually, we would go back. Sorry, Scott. I have the recommendation. There is a recommendation page for that subdivision. I just got to go back up to the slides. For that.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm just trying to look at the packet in the online packet, and it says recommendation 1 and then recommendation 2. So I just want to make sure we have the right order.
Sorry, and those you're exactly right. Those are recommendations 1 and 2 for the planned unit development subdivision. The recommendation 1 is for conditional use approval to allow it in the first place at all. And recommendation 2 is for the preliminary subdivision portion of it. Recommendations for the larger subdivision, the Rabbit, are
right
here.
Yeah, exactly. But But the only one that is preliminary is recommendation number 2. Recommendation number 1 on the item number 7 is not preliminary. It's actually to grant the conditional use.
Right. That's,
Right.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I misunderstood what you were.
Yeah, just procedural. 2 of them are final, only one, yeah, 2 of them are final and 1 is preliminary. There's three recommendations, 3 motions that are needed, but 2 of them are final, correct?
Right. 2 of them would not be heard by you again.
Exactly.
Item 6 and then item 1 of 7.
Correct.
Right on.
Okay. All right. I am open for discussion by members. If there's anything anyone would like to say, let's air it out.
Mr. Chair, question for us. It feels like maybe we should have discussions surrounding each one of the recommendations.
Absolutely.
Rather than having one broad discussion. So if we did discussion on the first one, then we could do a motion, and then the second one, and then a motion. Is that?
I agree completely. Yes, and so let's talk about the recommendation to basically, modify the subdivision that is currently Applegate condominiums and carve out that 5.7 acres and enable it to be developed in the future.
Mr. Chairman, just a question and thought on this. My biggest concern about, and I know much of what was addressed by the residents had to do with the process. Making people feel like the process is from the city side is just more of a rubber stamp, and obviously there were concerns about even the vote that the one person questioned whether they received the 67% as needed. The original proposal was 3 years ago. I'm sure residents have changed. So it's just, I know it's not necessarily anything we can handle, how the exchange was between the homeowners association and the applicant. But it does seem a little weird to me. And I know Mr. Millett had recognized that. I do feel for the Applegate residents and those that, that take pride in what they do and living there and having maybe a decision made that was 3 years ago. So I just wanted to just know that I do empathize with that. And I feel like I wish there was something we could do to try to encourage some more collaboration or some goodwill between those things. It doesn't feel like that the process on that side, not related to the city, was necessarily as good as it could have been.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I brought up how do we take at face value the position of the HOA, and is there any recourse for the residents, and that apparently is just them dealing directly with the HOA. The HOA is duly authorized to represent them, and that's what they're representing to us, that this is the way it is. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a bit of a disconnect for the residents that are not in favor of this proposal.
Chairman Markham,
Yes,
Mr. Cowan from the HOA was asking if he could speak to that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, George.
Am I on?
You're on.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is George Cowan. I'm the current president of Applegate HOA. And this whole process started before I became a member of the board. And I became a member of the board because I wanted to get involved and see this project through, because I could see there were some issues. So there was a vote taken, and any resident can go to the attorney's office and look at the actual votes. They do have those. So that is there for them to look at. We as a board have been pushing for this project because of what we'll be able to do with Applegate and refurbish it, bring it back to life, and do a lot of great things for our residents. So I just wanted to let you guys know that it was done correctly.
Oh, I appreciate that input. Thank you, Mr. Cowan.
I just got
Can I
a
make
question
one more
for
quick
Mr.
comment?
Cowan, if I could.
Sure.
Can I ask Mr. Cowan a question? How
Absolutely.
many members of the HOA board actually live at the condominium development?
So I don't know the exact number. I could get that number from our core management group who manages that. But the thing is to get FHA certified, it can only go up to a certain percent. So the majority of our owners actually do live there.
The majority, no, I'm on the HOA board. How many people on the actual HOA board live at the condominium?
I am the only one that does not. All other 4 board members live at Applegate.
Okay. And they're easy to contact and get in touch with?
Yes, and actually Alex, our secretary, she put the letter that was read together, but we have access to all of them.
Okay, I just, because we had so many comments, I just wondered how easy it was to contact the HOA.
It really is. And the other part of that, if I can make one more quick comment, is we have talked about this this project in our monthly board meetings for I've been the president for the last 2.5 years. We talk about this project every board meeting, and we've been open. We have a newsletter that goes out. We've talked about it. So all this information has been available if they choose to read the newsletter or show up at one of our monthly board meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I think I'm a little bit analytical and I want to know all the questions we're asking of the board. And I, in my mind, was wanting to know what percentage of the voters were present, with 80% of the present, all that. But I just want to make the point. So I agree with the discussion, but I feel like it's important to make the point that all that discussion is outside of our jurisdiction. We are just information is brought to us and we have to act upon the information. We can't judge the process because it's not our process, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I agree with Commissioner Mikhavich. I think the point is that we want to empathize and understand, and I do feel for both sides of it, because it can be a difficult discussion, and especially this one's a little bit unique compared to what we typically do. So I agree that it is totally outside of our authority and our purview to intercede on something between the developer and the HOA.
Thank you, Scott.
I have a question for Mr. Cohen.
Please.
A little earlier, I think you were on, a little earlier, we talked about sale of the property of the 5.07 acres and money going into escrow for Applegate to then be responsible to move the cell tower. So I don't know what those costs are. I don't know what the costs of or what the revenue would be to the HOA for selling this property. Have you gone through some analysis of what the cell tower relocation would cost, and therefore what kind of funds would be available to actually do considerable repairs to Applegate as it is?
We've actually talked about that extensively. What we're doing to offset part of the cost of the cell tower is we're going to sign new contracts with Crown Castle, who is the company that owns the cell tower, and they're going to prepay 20 years of the lease. And so that's going to give us half of the money that will go towards the relocation of the cell tower. So it will actually leave us more money to go through and do those upgrades on the community. But we've already got bids on a lot of those numbers. And as we get closer, we'll have them dial those bids in a little bit tighter so we know exactly where we're at.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any additional questions or discussion? Okay, and again, this is just agenda item number 6 that we're dealing with right now. Okay. I am open for a motion or more discussion. It is at the pleasure of the council.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. There isn't any additional discussion. Make a motion that the planning commission grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for the proposed Applegate condominiums amended subdivision on property located at 77 West Applegate Drive, subject to the following conditions, 1 and 2.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, that was Scott.
Yeah,
Mr. Nate-
I'll second that.
Mr. Nay, we can't hear you. I keep seeing you speak.
Okay, I have a motion by Ned Hacker and a second by Scott Woodbury that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for the proposed Applegate condominium amended subdivision on property located at 770 West Applegate Drive, subject to conditions 1 through 2 as presented to us this evening. Please call for a roll call. And Travis may have to give us a thumbs up, I think.
Right.
Or down or whatever.
He's muted on my screen,
Okay, call for roll.
not by me.
Now, Jared, you are muted.
Jared, you're muted too. Lisa's muted. Travis, oh, there's Lisa.
Yeah.
Come on, Jared.
Travis is trying to tell us something. He knows the answer here. He's writing it down.
There it goes.
That's why
Okay.
we can't hear him.
All right, call for vote, please.
Okay.
Jared,
Hey,
you
Jared.
have to unmute Travis.
Jared, you've got a note.
I don't. I can't see it.
It says Jared has me muted, 7921063.
Is that Travis?
Yeah.
You have to accept it into the
Travis, you're
meeting.
Now I'm good.
Whew.
Geez.
Okay, here we
Hey,
go. All right.
I get Mr. Chair, I guess now that Travis is unmuted, did he have any comments on that item?
The only
Travis?
thing I wanted to say was that this homeowners association has identified a problem and they actually have an asset that can solve their problem. And so I'm happy that they have a solution to their problem because other HOAs find themselves in a situation where they have no other recourse but to deteriorate and fall apart. So this is going to help this community tremendously.
Thank you.
Right.
All right,
Ready.
we are still awaiting roll call.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Mr. Woodbury,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Nay.
An unmuted yes.
Thank you. Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Markham.
Yes,
Thank
that
you.
motion carries unanimously. And now we will move to the other agenda item, which has 2 recommendations involving that. And so, we've talked about them extensively. I would like to encourage members to have some more detailed discussion amongst us now and see, if there are any suggestions, additions, deletions, or how you feel about moving forward on these items.
And Mr. Chair, as these conditions are the same, I think it's appropriate that we have one discussion followed by 2 motions after the discussion because the conditions are the same unless we impose any conditions that are unique to one versus the other. Is that?
I agree. So, feelings about the conditional use to allow the PUD subdivision or granting preliminary approval for the PUD townhomes.
I'd like to say that I appreciate the staff's effort to make sure everyone's comments were heard. And I appreciate the feedback they gave us on all the comments. I think they did a good job explaining the conditions around the concerns and what could or couldn't be done and why we ended up with the current suggestions. Having said that, I wish we could come up with a solution that gives us a little bit better setbacks. And I think that several have been discussed, and it sounds as if the Fieldstone builders are willing to look into those. I'm hoping we get a little bit better solution before the final.
Well, and we do have the ability before final approval to deal with that as well. So that I agree with you that's an overriding concern of mine. I want to see as much rear yard setback as possible on these units where they abut the single family neighborhood. And I also feel very strongly about an 8-foot masonry wall. I would support that being a condition added to each of these. I'm not able to make a condition, a motion, but I would strongly support someone doing that if they so desire.
I think the
Can I just comment on
PUD is
that?
good. Along those same lines, I guess I'm still not very comfortable with just even approving a preliminary without getting a little bit more firm buy-in regarding or buy-in understanding, I guess, of some of the conditions. There were a couple of questions and clarifications to the conditions earlier, which a little concerning. In which case, I would like to see what we can really do before we go to even preliminary, what we can do for setbacks, what we can do for some additional open space. We've lost a lot of open space for the entire Applegate to include the new PUD areas. So I'm a little reluctant to go all the way versus agreeing to a conditional use permit.
I understand. Travis, you had a comment?
Well, I was going to say that this was to your point, Mr. Markham. They've talked about the 15-foot setback and also the 8-foot wall. I think if they're able to find a way to move to a 20-foot setback, the 8-foot wall really, it doesn't become as necessary. The difference in 5 feet, it's further back. The original neighborhood has a 15-foot setback as per the plat. So there's reciprocity there. Both property owners have some responsibility of mitigation. Now, the new project obviously has a little more responsibility, but the existing homeowners have had many years to plant trees. They still have plenty of time to plant trees and to do things to help visually set back. At the end of the day, something's coming in here, and if they make it too challenging, it might end up being a 40-foot tall building. And then how are they going to feel about it? So I think the project that's coming forward, these are reasonably sized units. They're well spaced out. There's spacing in between the individual buildings. They're not super tall. I don't feel like someone's going to be glaring down into their backyard any more than a house in the other neighborhood. If it's a 2-story house, is going to be looking into the backyards of these neighbors. I think that they've struck a reasonable balance. If they get 20-foot setbacks because of loss of driveway space or road space, I don't think they need an 8-foot wall. That's just my opinion.
And maybe an 8-foot wall wouldn't be as necessary. However, I do feel like a solid fence of some kind would greatly enhance the project, even if it's standard fencing in that, because there's chain link there now, and you are right. Some neighborhoods, some of the houses have dense bushes, some don't have anything, and it's very haphazard. And I think that some type of solid fencing would greatly enhance the project.
So, gentlemen, explain to me the process then, because I agree with the discussion, but where are we in the process then? Because we have a few things that are in limbo. We would kind of like to be addressed, and we're not too stringent on the requirements yet.
Ultimately, it's Trey O'Neill's decision, or not Trey O'Neill, sorry, it's Trey's decision. He decides the road width. We have no say in that. We can't say, no, this road has to be smaller. It's the engineer's recommendation. We got to go with that. If he changes his recommendation, it opens the opportunity for this.
Right.
And what I'm saying, what I'm saying, Commissioner Mulkevich, is that I would like to see that kind of discussion occur and have a better understanding of that before we even approve the preliminary.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, from my standpoint, I agree with a solid masonry wall, whether it's 6 or 8 feet. I don't have strong feelings on, but I feel very strong about a masonry wall. You know, setbacks, I agree with Travis. You know, it comes at the cost of the road, and we need to look at what the engineer says. I hate making the road smaller and saying, oh, we've got enough shared parking, because we know that parking is always a problem. And so I really don't like doing that. And to Travis's point, there's 15-foot setbacks in the neighboring community. And so I think 15 would be appropriate, but obviously we kind of defer to the engineer on that, to Trey. One of the concerns I have is just more of, I really don't like the shared amenity. I think it's kind of a, I don't like it. I think you're adding a bunch more, but 48 more units. And it doesn't seem like you're adding any more amenities in terms of clubhouse and pool, and you're actually taking away amenities in terms of green space. So I would really like to see the applicant figure out a way, and even if it's a few fewer units, but figure out a way to provide another amenity or open space to the townhomes in addition to the swimming pool that would be shared. I guess those are some of my big concerns.
Yeah, I agree with that, because they're losing their tennis courts, which is, you know, an amenity, but it's not being replaced with anything.
Yeah.
A retention pond in the corner.
Right, and one of the key things of PUDs is the amenity aspect of it. It's almost like, you know, we say, okay, we're willing to change setbacks, but we want you to provide X. And I feel like in this case, they're not providing an amenity. And so I feel very, very strongly that the developer needs to put in some address, whether it be open space, park, barbecue pits, whatever it is, but that there needs to be additional amenities because of this.
Yeah,
So-
I agree.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I agree with everything we've said. I agree. I like the idea of additional open space or amenities. Now, what is the process to make that happen? Help explain that to me, because if we deny the preliminary, then it set things back a significant period of time, but it also prevents, money has to be spent to have a traffic study, to have road width studies, and isn't
Yeah.
all that initiated by
Well, they have to be done anyway.
Yeah.
whether they get the preliminary or not?
Well, before they get approval, these are all conditions that have to be met.
So therefore, if we do the preliminary, they're in the conditions and they'd have to start working on those things, right?
Yeah.
That's
They get the
correct.
ball rolling?
Mr. Chair, I'm much more comfortable putting in some of these things, and obviously this is a public meeting, and it's on the record of our feelings towards, you know, both what Commissioner Hacker said, what Mr. Nay, you know, on the road width and the amenities and different things. But I guess from a process standpoint, I would because it's just preliminary, I would like to put in some conditions, if, you know, staff allows, to put in one for an additional amenity and for the masonry wall. And then they can go and work through it, and then they come back for final. And if we're not satisfied with what they've come up with, you know, then at that point is when you deny it. I get hesitant on denying preliminary, because you know, I just think we're going to have to approve it again anyway. And so by having this preliminary discussion, that gives them a chance to really know that, hey, we're supportive of the project with these conditions.
With conditions. Sure.
You want to
And,
write
you know,
those up?
Any of the, you know, I am open to motions that include any of these. That's why we're here, is to discuss this and vote our opinion on what motions are put forward.
Yeah, I'd like to see Scott get those figured out. And
Yeah, I'm working on them.
okay, thank you.
I
I think
know
that's a great point, because I feel like there's a lot of loopholes that we're not comfortable with that we need to address. And if we add those to the conditions so that's on public record, I think we're on the right track there.
And the thing like a traffic study, I mean, that's going to have to be done before the final. And
Right.
so a lot of these things will be seen. I mean, you remember, I mean, I don't love the exit on the north onto, you know, Glendon Street. I don't, but obviously the engineers looked at that, and certainly we'll look at the traffic study. I hope that there's a way that they can look at the traffic study. Obviously, there's not, the traffic going into Horizon right now isn't very great because of obviously homeschool and what we're doing. So I hope there's ways to apply some models, because I obviously do get concerned about that. My concerns about school district and capacity, those have been addressed. I don't have any concerns on there, but I'll write up a couple of these conditions and then we can talk.
Even the existing conditions that are attached to these two items represent a tremendous amount of money. There is an awful lot of money involved with figuring out the utilities on the site, figuring out how much it's going to cost for these roadways, upgrading the access road to city standards. And so preliminary approval allows that to at least go forward to examine that. There's always a chance that when they put pencil to paper and they look at the conditions that are attached, they go, we're not going to get $600,000 for each of these units. And that's what we need to pay for this project as it is being required. So, that is one function of the preliminary approval to allow all of this to be fleshed out.
Jared, can I ask you a question, since you were in the room when the conversation with the engineer took place? Why did he limit the traffic study to 5400 South and 700 West? Why didn't he go over to the Intermountain property or to the Security National property and look at any of those areas?
You're muted, Jared.
I'm bad at technology because we have the data from existing traffic studies for those projects. So,
and this is negligible in the big scheme of that project.
We need, what we really need, and what we're looking for is a global, miniature global transportation study of this whole area. Trey's concerns about 700 West, engineering division's concerns about 700 West and the traffic we have go well beyond the 48 units going into Applegate. They have more to do with the 1 million square feet of Class A going into Security National. They have to do with the potentials that the AISU property holds as a potential mixed use development. The 48 units, we have some other data that we can compile to use with it, but there's only so much you can do there. His major concern with them was getting their own development served well enough to exit their property appropriately. And what they add already is, I can't do the math in my head, but the 172 more than 48, it's 6 times, whatever that is, more than what they already, it's 6 times what the new units are going to create. So I'm not trying to say that it's negligible, because it does have an impact. But we are trying to, with these access roads coming out onto Glendon Street, we're trying to, the new project is paying for Applegate's original sins. They should have had 2 accesses 40 years ago. Their traffic going out onto 700 West will be part of a larger traffic issue that we are currently trying to solve with a master transportation plan that's underway and will be done in about 18 months.
Okay.
So all of the conditions for the conditional use approval are the same as for the preliminary approval, as Commissioner Woodbury said earlier. So there again too, I mean, we're gonna have to get a traffic study done to confirm that we are in fact gonna be able to only have another exit onto Glendon and not perhaps some other place.
Right.
In which case, I think approval to that level is appropriate, since, like I said, all of the conditions are the same.
Correct. Okay. More comments from anyone? Travis, Lisa? Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have added a couple, I've added 2 conditions.
Okay.
And
well, if you would like to make a motion and include those in your motion, that'd be great.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion. If this is recommendation number 1, I will make a motion that the Planning Commission, that we grant conditional use approval to allow the proposed Applegate Townhomes PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 9, with the additions of 2 conditions. Condition number 10, to be a masonry wall shall be required on the boundary line between the subject property and adjacent property subject to the city fence standards. Obviously, that could be cleaned up and made a little bit prettier. The southwest, that southwest side.
We could say phase 2.
Phase 2, is that what it is? Okay. So
Or the rabbit's back. That would be good too.
rabbit's back. Jared, is that a legal term? So it is, but the thing is, I don't want it in phase 2. I feel like it needs to be as part of the beginning project.
No, I agree, but that portion of the
phase
plan
2 side
is called phase 2. Yes.
Okay. Phase 2 side. So
Scott, did you specify the height of that, or are we going to leave that open?
For the preliminary, Ned, I feel like that it's okay to be open because there was discussion on the setbacks, and so not requiring a 6 or an 8 is kind of dependent on setbacks per Travis's point. But I'm open to discussion, but I guess
I think that's good.
Okay, let me finish the motion.
That.
Let me finish the motion.
Okay.
So that's condition number 10, and then condition number 11 is the applicant shall include an additional amenity on the subject property to comply with city PUD requirements. I add that because this ensures a couple things. Number one, it gets us an additional amenity in exchange for the PUD requirements. And number two, should the HOA not invest the money as intended on the amenities currently on that property, it still provides an amenity for the new townhomes. So that's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second from anyone?
I'll second.
I will second.
Oh, okay, Travis.
All right, I will. I have a motion from Scott Woodbury and a second from Travis Ney that the Planning Commission grant conditional use approval to allow the proposed Applegate Townhomes PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 9 as stated in our presentation tonight, and the addition of two additional conditions. One being a masonry wall shall be required for the phase 2 site, and condition number 11 shall be that the developer shall include an additional amenity that meets city requirements on the subject property.
Correct.
Okay, call for vote, please.
Can I ask a quick question about the masonry wall? I agree with what we're trying to do. Does it need to, is that clear enough, or do we need to say the exterior portion of the phase 2 section of the plot, or does it?
I think the intent is clear.
And
Okay.
I think Jared's super smart, and he can make sure that that's in there, because again, these conditions will be discussed and will come forward in the final.
Right.
Correct, Jared?
Correct. And we can adjust a few words here and there to make sure it's clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can.
And
Okay, so for clarification, Jared, are you saying correct, you're super smart, or correct, you can?
Okay, call for vote, please.
Sorry, Mr. Woodbury,
Yes.
Mr. Ney,
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Mr. Markham.
Yes. Okay, motion carries unanimously. We have one other recommendation before us tonight. So any discussion or additional?
Mr. Chairman, just from a procedural standpoint, we need to make this the motion, and I'm happy to do it, but it needs to include the same additions of 10 and 11.
Correct.
So if there's no discussion, I will make a motion. Does anyone have any discussion?
Yeah, is there discussion that anyone would like to bring up? Questions, concerns?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that we grant preliminary approval for the proposed Applegate Townhome PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 9, with the additions Number 10, which is a masonry wall, shall be required on the phase 2 side of the project, subject to city fencing standards. And number 11, that the applicant shall be required to include an additional amenity on the subject property to comply with city PUD requirements.
Can I second?
Absolutely. I have a motion by Scott Woodbury, a second by Lisa Mulkevich, that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval for the proposed Applegate Townhomes PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 9, as presented in our agenda tonight, with the addition of number 10, that a masonry wall be required for the phase 2 site, and number 11, that the developer be required to include an additional amenity that meets all city requirements on the subject property. Okay, call for vote, please.
Mr. Woodbury,
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Nay,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker.
With the same conditions of the conditional use permit that we just approved, I vote no. I don't think we need to go to preliminary yet with the same conditions already on the table. No.
Mr. Markham.
I tend to agree with Ned. No.
Thank you.
Motion does pass, however.
Thank you, guys. And just for one point of clarification, we will, those are the phase 2 notation in that one condition refers to the location, not the timing.
Correct.
Right. Yes, yes, it is. It's used to describe the location,
Got it.
the boundary between the single family homes and the phase 2 portion of this project.
Yeah, Jared, the expectation is it would actually be included in the phase 1 of the project.
Yes.
But on the phase 2 side.
Right.
Perfect.
Phase 2 was just simply a way to describe the location.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Do we have any additional items that need to come before us this evening?
Just so Zach doesn't kill me, I need to mention to you all that the Fashion Place West small area plan is moving forward. It's doing real well, and there is a survey currently linked through our website, through the city's website. If you go to the city's website and go to our pages there, to the community development pages, there's a survey that for the project, and it would be great if you would all fill it out and mention it to people that you see. We're trying to get as much input as we can.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions from anybody? You know what? I want to compliment staff tonight for the effort they put into this. It's been a long evening, a lot of input, and I know we had a citizen that was concerned about access and the ability to have input on this item, and I can't think of a better way to do this given the current situation that we're in. And we had every bit as much input delivered tonight as we did in the original meeting where this was brought up, a year and a half ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's been a tremendous process tonight, and I want to thank everybody. It went very well.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can say to that point, this forum, and I love sitting in person, and I think it's better, and I certainly look forward to the time when we can get back and have the citizens and everyone in the same room. But due to this forum, we actually do accept more comment, because when we're in person, we restrict it to, if it's already been mentioned, we don't want them to come say it again.
Right.
So this format, we actually are able to get a little better pulse of the volume of certain items and feedback.
And many of the comments far exceeded the 3-minute limit that we would have allowed in a live meeting.
Correct. Yeah. So as much as people may say, and I told Jared when he brought me my packet that I like to be in the room with him. As I guess that's the way I feel about it. But I think this format does work and still allows citizens to express their opinions and to do the process.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm open for another motion.
Motion to adjourn.
There you go. Thank
Second.
you, everybody.
Good job,
All in
Phil.
favor? Aye. We are
Aye.
adjourned.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Good job, Phil.
Good night.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.